Who are you? Tell me. Who are you? What's your name?
I am Prince of Space.
A naked American man stole my balloon.
It's so hard to explain. Sometimes it seems as if I belong to a different world.
These creatures seem to be evolving at a lightning speed towards becoming the ultimate predators.
We'll simply have to declare a state of emergency ourselves.
One minute they weren't there, the next minute they were everywhere.
There's not just a few spiders out there, there's millions of them, and your town is right in their path.
Your weapons are useless against me, Phantom. You are merely exhausting your energy supply.
What evil sorcery is this?
Welcome back to 7th Street, and welcome back to another episode of Attack of the 50-Foot Podcast. I am your host, of course, Mr. Calvin Modier McCarthy, and I have my always reoccurring guests, who I guess are just my co-hosts now. You guys have officially been anointed that title.
You can't get rid of us now, man.
Chris Jaiwardna, I'm getting closer with that pronunciation, and Zach Carter, who's got a great name to pronounce.
Super easy.
Yeah.
It was at 3-4 syllables there, Zach?
3 syllables.
Yeah.
It is the second week of May 2020, but with the pandemic going on, it might as well be the 8th week of September, because time's irrelevant now. So in the spirit of this season, we once again decided to drop our concept for movies that Bob ruined and move on to highlighting some apocalyptic horror sci-fi films because it felt more fitting.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to let the previous episode concept sit there with no explanation at all.
Yeah, that's right, because it hasn't even really been discussed publicly yet, has it?
We mentioned it on the last episode.
Oh, did we? Okay. I can't
right.
remember that far back.
Yeah, we did. We mentioned it. And I think I've mentioned it in some videos that I do for my channel. You know, anytime I talk about Fulci or anything like that, I'm like, we're going to have a podcast where we talk about movies Bob ruined. And I've even had some comments for it. And
wow.
We've never done it.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny we keep saying it's movies that Bob ruined, but I mean, Warriors of the Wasteland's too good. Bob can't ruin that. New Barbarians, man, give that to me. Inject it straight into my veins.
Yeah, it's funny because he doesn't ruin any of those movies. I mean, any of the Fulci movies. It's really just the horrible dubbing. You know,
Mm-hmm.
He seems to be a competent enough child actor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. I've been trying to look up. That's what I'll prep for that because I want to find out whatever happened to him, when his last movie was, if anyone's done any interviews with him in the last 20 years.
Yes. The new Blue Underground, the 4K scan of House by the Cemetery has interviews with him and the little girl, who weirdly, I know this is weird to say, but she grew up to be really, really pretty, and he looks exactly the same. He looks exactly like he did as a child. Like with her, you would never know, you just think, oh God, she's beautiful. She's a beautiful actress. It's funny to think of her as a kid in the 80s, but Bob instantly, it's Bob.
It's kind of like the Arch Hall Jr. effect where, you see photos of him as a pilot and it's oh, there he is.
Totally. But he was at least an adult. You know what I mean? Already.
Relatively. He was, in EGOT, he was still 16, I think.
Yeah, but I don't know. You usually, you kind of know what they're going to look like. But kids sometimes, like Jonathan Lipnicki. They grow up and they look nothing like that. They did. So you guys are...
Couldn't tell if you were throwing shade or if you're Jonathan Lipnicki grew up to be a handsome man.
Beautiful guy. I think everyone knew what I was talking about with Jonathan Lipnicki.
It's a little column A, a little of column B.
So you guys are doing good?
Yeah. Yeah, it was interesting at the start of the lockdown. Got to have a symptom scare because the allergies, I'm immunocompromised in the sense I have asthma, and the allergy season this year in Oregon, especially in the Portland and Beaverton area, has been completely bonkers. And so it is awful. So yeah, I got to lock myself in my room for 5 days and wonder if I was going to die in 2 weeks. So that was fun. And I decided, well, I pulled the PS4 in here in my bedroom to keep me company. I got Resident Evil 4, the Resident Evil 3 remake coming. What else do I got in my stash? I decided to play Dishonored, which takes place during a plague. So that was a good idea. It was a great game though. I had a blast with it.
I don't really play video games, but on my phone, I've been playing this game called let me find it. Oh man, Infection. And you create a disease, and you like make it mutate with points, and you can kind of decide like what it does, and you can pick the country to make it start in. And the goal of the game, because eventually like the World Health Organization like starts to try and combat you and like create a cure, so you've got to kill the entire population of Earth before they can cure your disease. And I was playing the whole game as COVID-19. I was using all the same symptoms and everything, trying to see how far, starting it in China, and like, how far can this kill everybody? And no, it won't. Well, someone will solve it.
There's a ton of different games like that. I know Plague Inc. was the big one. Like a bunch of like YouTubers have played that, and that's a big one that a lot of people like to go to because it's a great way to use memes. Name your virus after a meme, so you go viral in your game.
Yeah, it's funny. It's kind of an interesting, not necessarily segue, because I'm sure we're not going to move right onto this. But for the longest time, I was playing online as codename Trixie.
Oh, nice.
From the Crazies. And trying to do it that way, making it cause psychosis. That's also a bad way to go, because people can detect psychosis pretty easily. It kind of gives it away that you're infected.
Mm-hmm.
But projects, you guys working on anything?
Zach, go ahead and go first, man. I'm curious what you've been up to.
Not too much. Just work. I've been writing a little something with Jeremy Garner from Spunk's Not Dead. So he and I are cooking up another little something that might get made someday. We shall see.
Nice. That's always exciting. I love when I love that there's a certain energy that you both kind of match. So it's like you kind of give him a little more to work with, and then he's able to kind of get the squishiness, on screen. So it's always cool to see those collaborations. Because I mean, because he did pass me the the script that he really wanted to do, his kind of Ghoulies one of yours.
Nibblers. Yeah, I got that too.
Yeah, I've gone through like the first I want to say 8 or 9 pages. I was in the middle of wrapping Spunk's Not Dead at the time, so I didn't have the time to finish it and just kind of got buried. But yeah, it's like I see what he sees in it, which is that it's really cool. So I mean, not to suddenly fillet you on the podcast or anything, but just but it is really good. And those people out there, just keep asking about Nibblers, and if you have anybody who has money, go tell them hey, you want to make something kind of good and squishy and fun.
Dude, I'd be psyched if that ever got made. It's funny reading through it now and realizing how many times I write erect penis, and then thinking how the fuck did I imagine this was going to get done without an erect penis on screen? But right. I'm fine with erect penises on screen.
Yeah, I have no problem with nudity. I mean, I think that's what keeps me employed as an actor these days. I'm fine with nudity.
I was thinking about erect penis. What was about that? No, I got distracted by the erect penis. No, sorry. What the fuck was I saying? But that's right. It reminded me that actually, there was another horror script I read. I was at a table read for in January. I'm not 100% sure I should say what writer director it was. It's one of those, if he hears this and his friends, the people who were there hear it, they'll know what it was. But the word sphincter was used in this sort of hellscape, fleshy Cronenbergian hellscape. I easily 80 or 90 times in a 100-page script. It was amazing.
I thought that maybe your description would like give it away with who it might be in town.
I know what he's talking about, but I wouldn't say if we're not
I don't know. I guess I'm just out of the loop.
Well, it didn't have me sign anything. It's just I would just want to be polite. It's also
For sure.
It's I guess this because the script itself actually feels like a weird combination of like oh god, it's like The Cell meets Jigoku with like kind of that fleshy flesh world kind of vibe you get more like out of films and comics, Hellraiser kind of stuff. So yeah, that was a wild. That's a dark script.
I think of who the hell that would be.
I'll tell you privately afterwards.
Oh yeah. I never get invited to the Sphincter script reads. I always get put in on the romantic comedies.
So Calvin, what have you been working
where
on?
Where are the fucking sphincters?
But Calvin, what have you been? Yeah, because you have because I just watched your Legend of Dinosaur and Monster Bird RTF.
Yeah, I've been doing the YouTube thing. Obviously, that's the easiest thing to keep myself busy with. Oddly enough, when you have all the time to do it, it makes it like infinitely more. I don't know. You get kind of like anxious doing it, and it's like you get that kind of itchy feeling, like you just can't concentrate on it for too long. It's like I need to, work on other things in the house and shit like that. But I've been trying to go pretty tough at the YouTube videos and editing a lot. I have that film tentatively still titled No Sleep that I've been editing, and I've got a couple of people working on the score for it. And really at this point, just kind of I have a couple of people who worked on it who've been watching the cuts without music or anything, and I've been working on the color grading. And I mean, I guess you've seen one of the scenes, Chris, because you were working on God, I always want to call him Colin, but that's his name in the movie. Connor.
Yeah, Connor.
His name is Colin in the movie. But I've been working with that for quite a bit, trying to take my time with it and writing, obviously. I feel like after this whole pandemic thing is over, Portland is such a like a small market, and we're not guaranteed to have big projects rolling through all the time. So there's part of me that is kind of curious, kind of excited to see what comes up out of the film community here, because I kind of feel like it's just going to be indie people kind of like the only ones who are creating any work. So I think a lot of the people who are like, oh, I can't do it for $50 a day, it's going to be people are going to just do whatever, including me. So there might be like a swell of low budget projects going on, which is kind of exciting.
Nice. Yeah, I'm going to be very intrigued to see how the community is going to change, because I know there's all this, the big issue is containment of this spread and making sure that there's no outbreak on a set, and these indie sets, all of three of us have seen and we've experienced, and we've sometimes been a little, well, I won't say too responsible, but for that type of dangers of putting it at risk and stuff. But there's definitely it's really difficult when we're working with no money to have to then, and especially when we're doing so many things ourselves, to keep track of making sure everyone's tested, making sure the results are getting put in, people got protective, the PPE and all that sort of stuff. And it's going to change a lot of things. I mean, we've seen, like folks like Claire Amadia and folks, talking about how art departments are, going to get hit the hardest for the bigger shows. And it's going to be interesting to just see how film production in general changes. I mean, I've even seen some of the distributors that I follow on Twitter were mentioning that it's going to be hard for even like in LA for stuff to get like fully bonded and insured until at the earliest, like maybe next year in June or July. And that is going to completely transform the film landscape.
Well, I'm super thankful and grateful that I got my feature done when I did. I mean, it was completed right when this all started. We just started talking about it on set as we were finishing the film, and it's a SAG film. So, if it would have been ran a couple of weeks too long, maybe I could have seen, SAG stepping in and saying, no, you guys have to shut down or something like that. Cause it was a bit of a pain to deal with them. So there were like a lot of hurdles to go through, and not really excited to have to do that again anytime soon.
Well, that's the thing though, is we when we evolve, if we can evolve, if we do our best to evolve, we get the people around us to handle that stuff. We get people who are dedicated producers. I think that's one of the the issue is not to get too soapboxy about it, but that's always the problem with us independent filmmakers, is that we have to do everything. So I mean, I want to be a director, but like I was realizing this, I started a business, one of those small business development courses through PCC just this Thursday, and I did this list of like, what skill sets do I have, and realizing, oh God, I know how to do everything because I've had to do everything.
Right.
And that's the catch, is that I think when we get stretched so thin that those frustrations become really easy to get overwhelmed by, because you have to produce and do paperwork and do accounting and payroll and all that other stuff, which is they're all legitimate and all important parts of the process, but it's the parts that we as creatives don't want to be doing.
Yeah, and shout out to Arissa. I mean, she really did handle a lot of that. There were times where, like you were saying, I would get very frustrated with it because I had so many things going on. And Arissa did a really good job kind of stepping in, being like, I guess, an executive producer maybe, or just a producer, and doing like the paperwork every day. I mean, that would have just been stuff that I would have forgot about, to be honest. We were just running so long and the days were late, and there were, there would have been times where I would have said, no, we'll just like fudge the paperwork or something, because you need somebody who can help you, who can have your back like that. And thankfully Arissa was there to do that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Well, I guess we don't really need to talk about any like new releases or anything, because nothing's happening. The world has completely come to a standstill.
I mean, there's still stuff on the streaming services. I noticed Shudder just dropped Blood Quantum, which I'm looking forward to watching.
Oh,
have you heard of that one?
I have not.
It's a zombie film where this indigenous American tribe in the small town realizes they're immune, so they're having to deal with a bunch of zombified white people. So that's kind of the setup, and of course, obviously, that's kind of bring. Everything's kind of monolithic currently at this point, the way that we consider Native Americans. And so the idea is like, well, now the tribalism is going to start to kind of return, and also the different groups, and like, how do we deal with the situation and things like that. But yeah, the trailer for it was really promising. It has a really good, intense drama feel to it. And it's specifically about I think it starts as the outbreak begins. So that'll be kind of exciting to catch that.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting.
I also think on Shudder, just real quickly, also just in terms of other titles, is I think Blood Machines, Ickerman's film, I think is supposed to finally drop this month.
Oh.
I actually watched a new release that has come out since this all started. It's a VOD, and it's also playing in drive-ins.
Oh,
which
nice.
is apparently the only theatrical market left at the moment.
Right,
and,
which is awesome.
And the distributor is capitalizing on that in a really cool way. I think it's a movie called The Wretched, which is playing they're doing like a drive-in double feature with another movie that I haven't seen yet. But The Wretched is really fun. It's a witch movie, sort of like with shades of like Rear Window and Fright Night. His next door neighbor is a child-eating witch.
Oh man, I'm checking some pictures. This looks amazing.
It was quite good, yeah.
Cool.
Brett Pierce and Drew Pierce, so brothers. Yeah. Huh.
Yeah, and it was produced by a guy I know called Ed Polgardy, who I worked with on the release of Masked Mutilator, which was a wrestling horror movie that he was involved in the 90s that we put out on Intervision.
Oh, really?
I remember you mentioning Masked Mutilator, actually. You were mentioning either on one of the podcasts or you and I were talking about it, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe it might have been when you and I were chatting after one of the recordings.
That one's quite fun, too. I think that one's on Amazon Prime, free with Prime, probably.
Yeah, I think most of the Intervision ones aren't they?
Yeah,
I've seen quite a few of them. Yeah. I think that like both of Matei's last films, the zombie films that he did, I think are both on there. I forget what they're called right now, Island of the Dead or something like that.
Yeah, Island of the Living Dead and Zombies at the beginning.
Yeah, I have both of them on DVD, but
yeah, all of those later Mateys are pretty fun. The Jail, A Women's Hell. Might be my favorite of his laters.
They're so ugly looking though. It's the only just that DV camera or whatever the hell they're shooting on was just awful. It looks like it no joke looks like my Obachan when she died, I got all of her movies, and her brother used to send her all these DVDs from Japan that were recorded off like the movie channel. So sometimes you get some really good stuff, some horror movie stuff I've found. But a lot of it are just these like Japanese soap operas, and that's exactly the video quality that Zombies the Beginning and his other later films have. And I wonder if that's what he was shooting on, like some sort of like Japanese kind of like
it could be. I think I know the look you're thinking of. There were like a run of low budget Japanese movies in like the late 90s,
I think the original
very
Ju-on
early 2000s that have
look.
that sort of look.
Yeah.
The one that comes to mind in mind that I remember was like cool movie, very ugly to look at, was something called like Love and Pop, I think it was.
Yeah,
it was just very clearly a little like it looked like a handy cam.
Yeah,
and had that quality.
Oh my god. And that's funny you mentioned. So Love and Pop, that's actually from the Evangelion director. That's from Hideaki Anno.
Oh yeah.
This is his first live action movie.
Yeah, it wasn't bad, just very unappealing video quality.
It's very hard to like get immersed into something that looks like that. And I know that is like kind of shitty for me to say as a low budget indie director who's up until, my last film had been using like DSLR Canons to make movies, so it's kind of like, it's kind of stupid of me to say, oh, that had shitty quality, but
it's to jump in on that conversation is, real quick is I do think it's partly it's the tools that we have, the tools we like. And it's just sometimes a matter of preference of what we like to use to create, and then matter of like what we like to watch as creators.
Yeah. No, for sure.
And it's because also one of the things that reminds me of talking about the DV look is that it was really exciting at the time, but coming back, like it's hard for me to watch 28 Days Later now because that digital camera look has not aged that well for me.
That's the only one. Not the only one. There are a few, but that's one that I still enjoy. That one. I know what you mean though. I watched it. It had been a couple of years maybe, and I had watched it like as soon as this whole outbreak quarantine happened. That was one of the first movies I thought, I should watch 28 Days Later. And it is jarring at first. You do go, whoa, I don't remember it being this noticeable, but it really is.
I watch a lot of garbage movies, so I can look past
right. You
what it was shot. I thrive on
shot
on video, so
yeah,
I'm willing to forgive a lot.
Shot on Shitio is a very acquired taste. I wouldn't rule it out. I'm not saying I'm not a fan, but you got to be in a certain mood. It's kind of like a cannibal film. You got to be in a certain kind of to watch, Cannibal Ferox. It's not just like, I feel a little under the weather today. I might watch someone get hooks put through their breasts,
right.
In a certain kind of mood.
Yeah.
But actually recently, my I know this is kind of running a little long, but I don't know if you guys noticed or if you guys knew about this, but the Dollar Tree is getting all of those indie films that were released on DVD in the past like 3 years that you see at Walmart for about a week for about $5, right? Movies like Spunk's Not Dead. I'm sure that eventually there's going to be stuff from Ammo, but there's things from like the company Uncorked, whatever the Four company. There's just a bunch of them, Wild Eye type stuff.
Yeah.
Well, the dollar store is getting all of those that were just in a warehouse, I'm assuming, completely new.
Yeah.
And I've been going to the Dollar Tree, as I know that's kind of been my bad thing about this quarantine. I have been going shopping at the Dollar Tree. And
gasp.
all of these movies, and it's like, you know, you only spend $10, but you get 10 movies. And the worst thing that's going to happen is it's going to take up room on my shelf. And I realize that most of these are probably free on Amazon at this point, but actually having a physical copy, I feel like kind of forces you to watch it, as opposed to having something for free on VOD. And I'll say I'll come back to it, but sometimes I don't. I've been watching a lot of those, and you know, there's been some interesting stuff in there. A lot of it is very low budget, and it's like, you know, starring C. Thomas Howell, and he's like, he's in it for less than a minute. He shows up at the very end and plays the priest.
Yeah.
Gives the person last rites, and it's, I mean, no joke, on the spine it's a picture of C. Thomas Howell in his priest's outfit, and he's, hey
man, you gotta use that key art.
It's awesome. There's something really cool about it. I almost want to like reach out to all these filmmakers, because, you know, kind of like at the spot that three of us are all in, we can all picture it. We kind of know these people in a sense, right?
Yeah.
You know, kind of
we get it. Yeah.
It's like being in the military. It's a lot like being in the military. We understand.
Yeah, that's actually one of the things about that I've really enjoyed doing, and I started doing after the lockdown, was I was inspired by a post by Jonathan Barkin, formerly I think of Dread Central, but now he works, I think it's the Horror Collective now, and he put out a post about supporting local and independent artists more than anything else, because, you know, with this, the big companies are going to survive a lot of what's coming, you know, economically, but that the indies are going to start struggling. And so I started reviewing locally made Pacific Northwest films on Dark and Moody Productions' channel, and that's been kind of the interesting thing. Is I've done like 2 so far, 3 so far. I haven't finished editing the Todd Freeman one, or the Freeman Brothers one, but my plan is to like go into ones like from other local filmmakers I haven't met before, that I don't know, and actually be like, okay, let's see what you got, you know, and be able to give them those, you know, a shout out, or at the very least a fair review. And I think that's kind of, it's like the weird, like, everything's changed to become kind of more, almost kind of centralized a certain way. Like there is the threads, foreshadowing, that we are, you know, kind of connected together, and trying to find some sort of way through this as a group, especially given how, you know, poorly our governments and infrastructures, and just, you know, as many persons in charge are getting hampered with trying to deal with this. So it's like we have to, you know, if dad's not, you know, so it's like we're siblings in a dysfunctional family where mom and dad are arguing so much and the kids have to stick together, kind of thing.
Right.
Which is also a bit of foreshadowing about one of the movies we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, I loved your review for The Drifter. I love Joe Sherlock. Actually, I don't know. Screw it. I'll just say it. Nobody listens to this podcast. Joe Sherlock had actually casted me as one of the leads in his next film, and we were about to start shooting, and then this whole thing happened. And I love Joe. I've never worked with him. I just know him on like more of a kind of personal level. We meet up at Crypticon every year and stuff like that.
I met him at Crypticon as well.
Yeah. I was really excited to work with him. He's got a very like trauma style to him that I really, really, there's something about it that I just really enjoy. I think maybe one of the more like enjoyable filmmakers in the Portland film community. I'm serious. His films are fun. They're not boring. They're just in there. And, you know, he kind of reminds me of maybe like a Jim Wynorski.
Oh yeah, he's very Wynorski. Yeah, especially with the boobs. The boobs everywhere is so Wynorski.
So Wynorski, and it's like, you know, whenever one of the movies I got at the Dollar Tree was the Blu-ray release of Sharkensaw Women's Prison Massacre by Jim Wynorski. Yeah, and I had not seen that one, and I mean, just a typical Jim Wynorski film. I had a lot of fun with it. And then I go on IMDb, and there's so many people, you know, obviously saying, well, this is like really bad. It's like, well, you're kind of missing the point.
Yeah. It's like, it's It's kind of like, you go into, you don't go into some hole in the wall, food place on the middle of some highway in the middle of nowhere and expect it to be a 4-star restaurant. You're expecting,
Right.
good dive food, basically.
Right. Exactly.
And that was, exactly. That was actually one of the reasons with doing the reviews, I was really kind of motivated to like do the review for the Freeman Brothers film Wake Before I Die, because it was billed as a horror movie. And it really is a drama, which is kind of like, has this thriller element that comes in. And it's like, and seeing it like get like 2.5, 3 stars out of 10, it's just like, but it's a pretty good movie. Mike Prosser is creepy as hell in that film. And
Yeah.
Where is that available to watch?
that is on Amazon Prime.
Is it? Okay, that one I didn't notice when that one was released, because I remember when they were making that, I feel like it was around the same time as Cell Count.
The Freemans were incredibly prolific for about 5, 6, 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I was asking Todd about that. I said, like, dude, you guys were so prolific, and what was that like? And he said, it's one of those, I'm glad I'm not there anymore. I'm thankful for the things it gave us, but oh my God, I'm glad I'm not there, because they did Wait Before I Die, went directly into Cell Count, and then started prepping and then shooting The Weather Outside, which was Jason Freeman's film, which does not have distribution, which I wish it did, because my dad saw it and says very Twilight Zone, and Mike Prosser is the lead in that, which looks amazing. And then they did the prep for The Beautiful in 2015, which my father and I did behind the scenes work on, and that looks really good. That was kind of like a Western. Shortly after that, just, and what am I saying? Like in the middle of that, they were trying to get that M is for Marriage, which then turned into the Lovesick Project, and there was all this stuff that was kind of moving on, and there was like announcements about it that Barbara Crampton was going to be involved, and but Wake Before I Die is like, I like to call it like a faith-based drama that gets interrupted by a Hitchcock film, because like because it's about this pastor in a small town that moves in and he's taken over the congregation and begins to realize that a cult has probably infiltrated some of the members, and so it's very light on those kind of genre elements, but like, Robert Blanche is fantastic in it, and it's Bob McKeon as the lead, and it's just kind of cool to see all these folks I haven't seen forever, in it, like Adrian Vogel and Andrew Walker and all that. But yeah, it's a good film. My review of it should be out within another week or two.
Nice. I'm definitely gonna watch that.
Yeah, likewise. Got nothing but time these days. I'm trying to catch up on all of that stuff and trying to give Spunk's Not Dead some extra views, and just letting it play.
Yeah.
Just put it on in the background and mute it.
Yeah, just put it on.
I do that with my podcasts on YouTube that I've been working on. I gotta get those analytics up, man.
Yeah, I've kind of given up on that. I don't get it. It's like I sit there and I try to figure it out by looking at the analytics and going, okay, this, and that. And I try to do polls and things like that. But no, people will just watch what they want to watch.
Yeah.
I mean, the payout on Amazon is so terrible at this point. You're probably paid more in electric to play the movie than you're making on it.
Oh, yeah. Totally. But it's not about that. What I really want is it to get recommended to people and it to get out there.
I have it in my queue, like on my Amazon playlist or whatever, just in case. Then it'll pop up on the people who watched this also watched this thing.
Exactly.
Try to do my part.
That was actually something that happened weird to me. Just this is a really small anecdote, I swear, but my last short film, In Silence We Suffer, had a really disappointing release. Just a lot of people didn't really respond to it. I realized that my actors that were bringing people into it were unhappy with how violent the first couple of minutes of it were. So it like plateaued at about like, I want to say like 500, maybe 600 views or something by the end of November. And just no one talked about it. I was like, okay, fine. I'm just going to chalk it up to a loss. I made something that nobody likes, and I should, reconsider all my decisions as a filmmaker. And then, and I talked about this on Facebook, you guys may have seen this, is that suddenly it got picked up in somebody's like horror shorts on YouTube list as the lockdown was starting. Like somebody probably just had the time and just started putting up like all these horror shorts on there. It has close to 2,000 views now.
Wow. Nice.
And so that's just kind of the thing, is like there was recommendations, they help. And so to whoever, and what's cool is, I'm getting like feedback from people. Obviously a lot of people are like, pissed off at the ambiguous ending, which is like, deal with it. But it's cool. But yeah, exactly. That's the thing. So I guess, I feel like we're getting into this tangent. We're just kind of chatting at this point, but the thing I feel out of this is to remind those of us like us who are wanting to make films or feel discouraged is just keep trying and try to, keep your name out there, because, sometimes all it takes is just the right recommendation from the right group of people, and you get you're able to kind of get a leg up.
Yeah, I have my advice, I guess, for what it's worth, is I call it the carpet bombing technique, where my YouTube videos, it's like I don't spend a ton of time on it. It's more about let's just blanket this like subgenre, or blanket the horror. I'll do this and I'll do that. I'll do spider film and I'll do slashers. I'll do Italian. I'll do Japanese, and eventually you just get all these subscribers from elsewhere that then it gets recommended. And I mean, I've been averaging more and more subscribers just every day from doing it that way, I think, because like my most viewed or most liked or most watched episodes, it's like, here's an Italian one, here's a Japanese one, here's a VHS thing, and I think I'm getting a little bit from each section. So I always just tell people, just make a bunch of stuff. Just keep making stuff and putting it out there. And I think that eventually people just, you just see it. You've covered enough ground, you've carpet bombed enough to where, you finally got someone.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a pretty morbid analogy, but
Yeah, but it works, because I think, what it basically means is, this crossover appeal, and you might even be introducing people who are come for the slasher movies to a Japanese or monster film that they end up loving. You never know. So that's kind of the cool thing about the fact that the angle is very much from a perspective of passion, not about destruction. It's not made to be, tear anyone down. It's about, it's trying to share the love.
It's I have a very hard time being mean toward filmmakers. I think I just have a soft spot for them now. I just don't want to point out minor flaws. And there are just so many YouTube reviewers who they sit there and they pick out little things, and you go, oh, well, really? Are you telling me that this $20,000 ghost film has like some minor inconsistencies? Are you suggesting that the script wasn't flawless? Are you saying that the Bye Bye Man wasn't supposed to be the next Shining? No, I mean, it is what it is. Like, I'm pretty good about getting past that stuff,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, I just don't.
I thought the Bye Bye Man was unwatchable, but I didn't feel the need to go go tell everyone that I thought it was terrible.
It wasn't.
I just quietly turned it off and was like, I don't need to finish that.
I didn't even watch it. I knew.
Oh yeah, it was. I mean, I gave it a shot. I tried. It was real bad.
Yeah, I can usually tell if something's just not going to be for me.
Yeah. There's that window though, because I definitely like bad movies. For whatever reason, that one was just dull, whereas like Slender Man, somehow I responded to, and I was like, this is the kind of bad movie that I can really get into.
Yeah, which is no, and I feel that. I mean, especially when it's strange that you feel like the only one out there that likes something, because I know, Calvin, you hated the new Grudge that came out in January.
Yeah, man, I did not like that.
I loved it. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, it's one of those, like, I think what it is just what we wanted or what we got out of it was, it was different. It's a difference in taste, but that's how it works.
Eventually, over time, I realized that what I didn't like about it was basically what Roland Emmerich did to Godzilla, this guy did to The Grudge. He changed everything to where it's like, this would have been better if it wasn't called The Grudge. If I went into it and it was called like Spooky Ghost House, and then you watch it and you go, oh, okay, yeah, Spooky Ghost House. Yep, It was a spooky ghost house, had spooky ghosts, jumped out at me a couple of times. Sure. But you go into it, and then it had a very promising opening. I loved the opening of that movie, and I thought, here we go.
Really good. Yeah,
this is going to be great. And I don't know. For me, I just started going, what is this? I don't know what this is. But yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed it. I don't know. I was maybe just overhyped for it. I was really excited for it.
Yeah, it happens. Yeah. Anyway, I'm sorry to get everything tangent. I know we're running kind of long on our intro before we get to the topic of the day.
Yeah.
But that's
I feel like
us.
there's never been a time limit on any of these things.
No, we always run way too long. But
Zach, I just noticed, quick interruption, Zach, on your webcam, I just noticed, are you wearing a Race with the Devil t-shirt?
Yes, I am.
Oh my God.
Nice.
I love you, sir.
Wonderful.
All right. Let's get into the featured reviews.
What's the order of the order of the day?
So I'm gonna go ahead and start us off. I was actually thinking about going in order of the time they were made. I just thought that would be interesting. We'll go from the Crazies to Threads to Color Out of Space. Those are our 3 featured reviews. So the Crazies, I mean, I'll kind of give a quick rundown. I'll just read the IMDb page summary here, which is okay, I guess, and we can add some to it. The military attempts to contain a man-made combat virus that causes death and permanent insanity in those affected as it overtakes a small Pennsylvania town.
Come on, man! You gotta give it a grindhouse voice. It's the military attempts to contain a man-made combat virus that causes death and permanent insanity in those infected as it overtakes a small Pennsylvania town.
Or the very slow. The military attempts to contain a man-made combat virus that causes. Yeah, I can't even do it like that. I'm concentrating on the voice. So yeah, the Crazies. It's a pretty broad rundown of the movie. I mean, I'll just start it off by saying I absolutely love this movie, but George Romero is my favorite director of all time. So I think that this is a masterpiece of his. I think that it deserves to be maybe in the top 3 with Knight and Martin. Wow. I think that this is a brilliant film. These are like one of my favorite types of apocalyptic films in that you have your main characters, but it's more broad and concentrating on this this small community as it crumbles, which is just beautiful. I love the sense of dread about this film. I love watching like every faction of society just crumbling and them scrambling to try and fix the problem or contain the problem. Just great commentary on human nature. Very pessimistic. Good old George.
Yeah, no, it's hard to. I mean, I can't argue with the praise for it because I mean, God. I guess for interesting history about the film is that this didn't do well when it came out.
Not at all.
Yeah, and I guess Season of the Witch, The Crazies, and Martin basically being like doing disastrous business was what put George in the hole, especially with this one. Because I'm looking this up here, and so this film approximately cost around $270,000. Which, you know, for the scope of the productions that, you know, that they were making at the time, and for 1973, 72, right. I mean, that ain't chump change, you know, that's
that's not a bad drive-in film right there.
Yeah. And the scope of it, you know, especially in this picture. And that was what led to, you know, Dawn of the Dead being sort of his last ditch effort before having to kind of call it quits. And it's but yeah, I'm trying to remember even when I first watched this movie, because I'm assuming all 3 of us, we all grew up watching this movie as teenagers, is my suspicion, you know, watching this on VHS. And it's this, I love how just completely like, it just throws you into it. It gives you the context as you go, but like the opening scene it sets the stage of it's so chaotic and frenetic, and, you know, and especially that the horror of it starting really badly in the middle of the night is a wonderful way to like just like wake everyone up, and like the fire department, the infrastructure is like everyone's having to get woken up and figure out, okay, what's going on, and this is finally happening. Yeah, there's a amazing energy to it. There's an incredible for the budget scope. I mean, they had so much access to the town. They have the fire engines, the military gear. There's a lot of scenes with extras in this that, you know, was like Night of the Living Dead, but like bigger. And it's a wonderful follow-up to Night of the Living Dead, because it's very much in that same style, but it's everything's kind of ramped up. Like you can see he's getting ready for dawn, basically. And in watching it again this week, I loved seeing how chaotic the edit is, and Romero's editing, I think, is in many ways really underappreciated, especially with this film, because he created something that has almost the staccato editing you would expect out of like Cassavetes or early Scorsese, Godard.
Russ Meyer. It's kind of got a Russ Meyer.
Yeah.
Is what I always think of.
Yeah, but I mean, because I've been starting to study more of the kind of older classic art house films through the Criterion Channel, and which is not to say I've been slacking off on the genre stuff, but it's wonderful to see how he integrated that. And I almost wonder if that's part of the reason it didn't land with some people at the time, was because the style is so frantic and frenetic, and that it's more of a what you would consider like a issues picture, be some more like Punishment Park or or Shadows, or actually the one that came to mind, even though it uses a lot of takes, is it tonally reminded me of Shirley Clark's The Connection. That sense of like everything is going wrong because if you've seen The Connection, it's about heroin addicts, and it's and it was made with heroin addicts in the movie, and it's a that's the kind of grisliness that George is able to give it. But yeah, I mean this especially I feel was so much of its time. I love this movie. There's so much I love about it.
Yeah, what I can say really quickly about the release, what I do know about the release is There's Always Vanilla, which is the other one. It's funny. Martin is actually the one that really brought him back. Actually, got him Dawn of the Dead, because it went to one of the big prestigious film festivals before it was really prestigious to go to those. But that's where he started getting. That's where he met Stephen King. He went to this big film festival for Martin, and it saved him. But Season of the Witch, There's Always Vanilla, and The Crazies, it was produced. Oh my gosh, I can't remember the name of the company. It doesn't matter. It was owned by a guy who was putting out porno. He was making a lot of money by doing softcore porno that went into the theater. And George Romero says that the reason that these movies did so bad, other than it being very low budget, and Season of the Witch and There's Always Vanilla, you can argue that those are good films, but they're not money makers.
Right.
But the producer, the production company, they were used to porno, which was put it in a porno theater and it makes money. So they didn't really know how to market the film. So they just released the film. They just put it in some theaters in New York and here and there, and nobody went. Nobody wanted to go see the movie. They tried to put up billboards and hand out flyers, but the guy did not know how to market the film, and all three of them just bombed. So he had no way to get the word out there. So they just kind of sat around in limbo until Dawn of the Dead. Really.
That is wild.
Yeah. Sucks.
Yeah. And it goes to show, you have to be careful with what distributor that you go with.
And to be fair, I think the guy, he was doing what he knew, right? He was successful with porn. He just didn't realize that horror films should not be marketed like a porno film. People, will just go to the porno theater. They're not going for a title. I don't think he realized that. But and another thing about the beginning of this film that I love so much is, Romero always has these themes of the destruction of the family unit, which is one of my favorite things to steal for my movies. I always try to write that like a dysfunctional sort of family unit. And it's really cool that this one starts off with a family unit crumbling and the dynamic of the brother and the sister, and the brother is teasing the sister about zombies. It starts the exact same way as Night of the Living Dead. It kicks right off with a brother teasing his little sister, and then, the monster appears, which is really kind of cool.
Yeah, the opening scene of The Crazies is really strong.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's also I love also it's the kind of thing, in terms of because our theme is apocalyptic, stories, and one of the things I like about it is there's this sense that of it's going to get you eventually. Clanker, eventually saying I got the bug, is a wonderful moment of him starting to lose it. And then just the I love there's no preamble, you wondering if the wife is immune and then just after a harsh cut, you see her starting to giggle, and you're like, oh shit, that's it's a great way to set up the last like 15 minutes of the movie.
Yeah.
So that no one is safe, nothing is sacred.
Well, and even if there is an out, everything's so chaotic, there's no safety net in place to recognize it.
Mm-hmm.
The movie is extremely pessimistic, but I do like that. Maybe that's why it holds up so well.
Mm-hmm.
It's got a little bit, it's almost saying a lot of the same things as the people who during this pandemic are saying that annoy me so much, where they're saying, well, the cure is worse than the problem itself, right?
Yeah.
But, I mean, the movie is sort of saying that the soldiers are infinitely more dangerous. The government is infinitely more dangerous than the crazy people themselves. I mean, the military is just rolling around shooting people and locking them up in a school. Seems like, the crazies are pretty easy to handle for kind of the main characters of the film. It ends up being in like not knowing, right? Like who's crazy. Mm-hmm. Seems like everybody's crazy now,
Mm-hmm.
It seems like the scientists and the soldiers and
because that's why I loved watching it again, was seeing how the doctor, I think it's what's his name, Richard France, I think plays him. When he makes his discovery that he's unable to share with the world at the conclusion of the film, and the thing is, no one else can figure out what he saw. So was he just infected and he saw something that wasn't there? Like that is the other haunting possibility about it. And he really captured, zeroed in on the uncertainty of the time in which it was made, coming out of the 60s and the early 70s of, that everything was just all coming undone. I mean, I love the references to like the self-immolation, the Kent State references. I mean, it's like that, it feels like it's so much of that time. Yeah. And that everything was a little crazy. So everyone was a little crazy.
Right. Yeah. The priest burning himself, I think, is one of the strongest scenes. I imagine, especially then, because that was something that was probably fresh in the like collective psyche, of these monks burning themselves in protest. And I just think that's a really strong scene. It comes at a really chaotic moment in the movie too. Mm-hmm. It's all of that stuff. I love movies where you get the full scope of everything going to shit. That's why you guys got to see Catastrophe 1999. I really wanted to do that on here, but I knew that's a harder one to track down. God, that movie is great and grim. Mm-hmm. And it follows all these different characters. Just kind of
and that's a Yoshimitsu Banno one, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, because I was kind of thinking of watching Godzilla vs. Hedorah this week.
Yeah, that would have been a good one actually for this podcast.
Yeah.
It's got that apocalyptic feel.
Another honorable mention regarding the Crazies, though, if we kind of feel like we're winding down on the subject of it, was I also forgot until I saw her in it again, was Lynn Lowry in this film, which ties her to another kind of good apocalyptic viral outbreak movie, Shivers.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And that was another one that I was thinking like, oh yeah. And, bringing up the idea of like the Crazies are easier to deal with, than the military, say, it made me think of Shivers, of how that's such a contained space, whereas the Crazies is this nice rural spread out. So you're only dealing with, maybe about 3 or 4 crazy people at a time, maybe like a group of 10, but they're so nuts, they're not going to like mobilize. Whereas in Shivers, it's the horde, and you're in this building, and, and then at the end of Shivers, where they all get in their cars and they drive towards the city. Like it feels like it's a very different situation there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lynn Lowry she has a cameo in the Crazies remake.
Oh, does she?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I put that on the other night and was paying half attention to it just to compare and contrast.
She's also in that movie, I Drink Your Blood.
Yes.
Yeah. And she had a great run of movies in the 70s.
She was beautiful too. She's she's like a prettier version of Sissy Spacek.
Yeah.
Don't you think? She's like a prettier Sissy Spacek.
I can see that comparison.
Yeah, it's like the supermodel version. Like Sissy Spacek is the great girl next door version, and then Lynn's the supermodel. Yeah. Yeah.
And she has one of the most disturbing scenes in the movie, where the guy who plays Dr. Logan in Day of the Dead, is her father.
Oh, that's right. That is Doctor. That was why he was so familiar. That's Doctor.
Yeah.
That's Doctor Frankenstein. Yeah,
it's Doctor Frankenstein, and he, yeah, I mean, there's a pretty uncomfortable incest rape scene with Richard Liberty is his name.
Yeah.
Richard Liberty, where he rapes his daughter, which is that's a point in the movie too where you start going, well, what exactly does this virus do? I guess that would be the one thing about the movie that I wish was maybe a little more developed, and maybe one of the things that the remake has a little bit on this, in that I think it's sort of the point of the movie that you can't tell who's crazy and who's not, and who was actually just crazy before all this happened. Was Richard Liberty always like that? Before he goes crazy, he kind of talks about being overprotective of his daughter. So I think that's sort of the point of the film, but there are definite encounters with some of the crazy people where you go, well, what exactly?
Yeah, it was wild to see that scene again, because it wasn't until I saw this one shot and it came flashing back to me, having seen it the first time when I was about 13, I want to say, and it's a shot afterwards where they've gotten the dad off of her, and she's sitting there in bed, and she's got the blood on her hands from her broken hymen, and it's like, whoa, fuck. I remember as when I was young, like the connection of what that meant hit me, and I was like, I didn't know you could show that in movies, you know?
Yeah. And I know that just speaking of the way that little scene is edited, because I think that the character, he's like hitting these little gongs. And it's fine. I didn't watch this for the review. I've seen it so many damn times. But I know that Romero said that he originally wanted like that to be a bit stronger and wanted that edit to cut a little bit better with like the gongs and stuff. But that even the porno producer was the one who kind of stepped in and said, tone that down.
Wow.
Yeah. That the incest part was maybe going to be too strong, and that it was really going to turn people off. But it's effective. It's really effective.
Yeah, it's a strong scene. I would call that a walkout point.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, George is good at that. But yeah, no, I mean, I think we're all in agreement though. It's a great film. It's a really interesting one to look at during this pandemic, and yeah. I don't know if I put it at top 3 Romero for me, just to contrast, but part of that's because I have a really strong soft spot for Knight Riders is the main
thing. Yeah, that's a great one. In that I think that's like the most biographical of George Romero.
Yeah.
It's got the most, he's talking about himself. He's Ed Harris in that movie.
Oh yeah. Totally.
Can we all agree it's top 3 non-zombie movies?
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, there are days where I like this more than Dawn, to be honest. It's like, this and Martin are some of my favorites of George's films. I think there's just something about like just the pessimistic nature in both of those films that of like human nature and like how people interact with this kind of like weird makeshift family unit that's I don't know, speaks to me on kind of like a certain level. I really love this film.
It's the found family trope, and that's the thing. It's a found dysfunctional family trope, which is rare. So
right.
So yeah.
And like I said, this is maybe the one of the 3 movies that we're talking about today that has kind of a point of view that's a point of view of this pandemic that we don't agree with, so it feels fair to talk about it, right? Like I said, it's got this whole the government's gonna fuck it up feel to it, and they do. So we're being fair and balanced on this channel.
Is that what we're doing? I thought we were just being a bunch of jerk offs talking on a podcast like everybody else who's probably on lockdown.
No, I just thought I always think that that's interesting about this film, is it's got a very it's got a weird message to it. I'm not even really sure what the message is in this film, actually. It's just like everything's fucked. If anything like this were to ever happen, people are fucked because they're awful, is kind of the point of this. I mean, even the soldiers who aren't crazy are stealing shit from people, just killing people. And
They're having a good time.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
anything else?
I think the one last thing, just the real last thing, was I did have somebody who was a teenager. I was in my 20s, and I had somebody I know. He's a cinematographer now who actually did a shoot here in Portland. And he did not like it. He just didn't understand. I was trying to explain to him, like, but this is about that time, and he's like, why? Like, I don't. It's like, it was okay, it was fine, but it's just. But I want to like go back to him. I need to like. This is reminding me. I should go message him and like, hey Dennis, what do you think of this movie now?
Right.
Because he was like 16 at the time.
I wasn't super high on it the first time I saw it, but I was pretty young, and I think what I wanted was a Romero zombie movie that I had not seen. You know, it was kind of like that missing zombie movie. I probably saw this around the same time that Land of the Dead came out. I think I was in like 7th or 8th grade, and I saw that in the theater with my dad, and then, you know, was really just kind of getting into IMDb at the time and found out about this movie that way. And thought, oh wow, there's this like lost Romero zombie film that I've never seen before. So I remember watching it and maybe being a little disappointed the first time I saw it. But
yeah. I hadn't seen it for at least 10 years when I watched it now, and I would say that I enjoyed it more now. Whether or not it has anything to do with, you know, current world situations, or just maybe I'm a more pessimistic adult than I was a teenager.
Right.
I don't know, but it did resonate more now, or it had a bigger impact now. So I would recommend it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right, let's start something new here. Out of 5, what would you rate this film, Zach?
Out of 5, The Crazies, taking into account all other movies that exist, I'd give it a 3.5.
Cool.
Chris?
I'd give that a solid 4. And part of that is more taking into account the aspects of the conditions under which it was made, which are clearly evident through the film, because it's just one last little thing is, for anyone who hasn't seen it, is that it's very low budget. It's amazing how they squeezed everything out, but it also teaches you in the process how to make a film with that type of scale for nothing. So yeah, 4 for me.
Yeah. Definitely a 4. Maybe on a good day, a 4.5. It depends on my mood. Like I said, I've really, really grown to like this movie. And part of what I like about it so much is what Chris just said. It's like an indie filmmaker. There are little mistakes, little low budget mistakes in there that you recognize now, and it makes you realize that, you know, these great masters of their craft, right? The horror genre, all had to learn like everybody else. You know, this movie has awful screen direction. There's a lot of like kind of jumping. They cross the line a couple times in this, especially when the soldiers are like in that room. They're like hanging up all those lights. It crosses the line like 3 times, and like they're like looking the wrong direction when they're talking to each other. So there are just like little things about it like that are very charming, as well as being a good movie. So yeah. Is that it for the Crazies, I think?
I think so. What's next?
All right, moving on to Threads. You can go ahead and read this description if you'd like, Chris.
I shall. Give me just a sec to cue that up. I mean, because I'm just to let folks know on that, I just got out of this film before we recorded this. Like,
Which is great.
Oh man, great. I'm still processing, man. Holy shit. Okay. The effects of a nuclear holocaust on the working class city of Sheffield, England, and the eventual long-term effects of nuclear war on civilization are showcased in this television film from the mid-1980s.
You didn't say it in a British accent.
I'm trying to be careful. I'm trying to be careful with that, because I do a Let's Play channel now with someone who's from Ireland, and I think he kind of scowls at me a bit. Shout outs to you, Paul Castle Rook.
It's funny, when I was working on Friday the 13th Vengeance, the girl that I was playing opposite, who's like my girlfriend, is from England, and I'm just a goof, so I just like goofed on her all the time with her accent. It's funny, I was always trying to do it. She was always trying to teach me how to like do it right. Like, this isn't even right. It is funny. But
So,
Threads, dude. What do you think?
So, God, it's like I feel a little nervous to go first. I mean, the main thing is I am completely just like speechless. And there actually is here we go. There's actually a little piece of trivia on IMDb that I'm going to read off that mentions that Mick Jackson recalled that most BBC productions would usually be followed by phone calls of congratulations from friends or colleagues immediately after it was done airing on television. No such calls came after the first airing of Threads. And he later realized that people had just sat there thinking about it, in many cases not sleeping or being able to talk. And there's, even though, I mean, I've engaged with a lot of apocalyptic art. I mean, I've read, fiction novels. I've seen films and, the music. And I mean, even there's actually a great dialogue scene in one of the new Wolfenstein games of all things, where it talks about the nuclear fallout after an attack on New York, where like the person's telling the war stories of like children's bodies falling apart as they're screaming for help, and like they're just rotting and melting away. And this film is just still, I think it's, what's amazing about it is I was expecting in many ways to be much more visually visceral, but the fact that it kind of it's trying to push the boundaries of a mid-1980s BBC television movie allows it that it has this wonderful slow burn. It builds up and builds up. And then when the bombs drop, and then it just doesn't stop. And so that any little thing just is more and more on top of it. A horror after horror after horror. The way that like, even just the simple act of someone vomiting because you're realizing that the radiation sickness, like there's a great title card that says, during the first few days, the symptoms of radiation sickness are going to be indiscernible from panic. And then it cuts to the Kemp parents and the father vomiting into his handkerchief. And it's such a visceral image to cut through. And then, his wife is next to him and half her face has been burnt. And it's just it's a hideous, harrowing experience to go through. And it's great that it was made at the time it was, especially given that one of its inspiration points apparently was a field exercise in the early 80s or late 70s that was done in England. And they basically realized, we are not ready for this to happen. And that was a big inspiration for the film, especially the way it portrays infrastructure. It's my first kind of visceral reaction to it is I feel this sense of horror, not just at the film and what it shows, and what the fact that we have literally created a weapon that can do this to to our world, to every piece of mankind, and to the planet. It is also that someone could get from this film not the message of this is how horrible it is, we should never do this, we need to dismantle these weapons now, but think to themselves, oh yeah, this is why we have to do it to the other side first. And that is like the most like gut-wrenching thing.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, it's funny you read that bit with Mick Jackson about after the screening, because there was I think it was aired after Threads. The BBC had an actual documentary on nuclear winter called On the Eighth Day.
Oh God!
Like it was like a panel show with experts that basically just backed up. Yeah, this is what would happen. It was pretty accurate.
Wow.
So yeah, to think that this aired on television in the midst of the nuclear scare of the time is horrifying.
Yeah. Yeah, I love this movie. I love it. I love it so much. I didn't know what to expect from it the first time I saw it, and this was maybe a year ago that I got the it is Severin, right? It's a Severin release.
It is indeed.
And was just so blown away. I was expecting to get The Day After, which is kind of goofy, and this movie is so dark and is much closer to something like Catastrophe 1999. I love all the title cards that come up and everything. But like you guys were saying, it coming out during, like sort of the height of the Cold War. I love the aspect that the UK is sort of, and they were kind of just caught in the middle. There's like the protest scenes where they're like, just let the Russians and the Americans fight it out. We should why do we have to be a part of this? Which is so true to get that point of view of it, that we, when you have world conflict like this, you just have a lot of people who kind of have to side on, pick a side, and now they're caught in the middle, and it had nothing to do with them, in a sense. It's
because that gets into the whole NATO conversation, which is itself another big can of worms, because things like NATO are important for certain other skirmishes to keep oppressive forces from, say, decide, like the whole situation in the Ukraine, about what was back in, what was that, 2014 or 2013, and them having to say like, okay, yeah, you're not going to do that,
But I think like that piece of dialogue from, like the description says, the working class. I mean, this isn't like the government saying, of course the government's like, oh, we support capitalism, but you can certainly see where being like a citizen in a country where it's like, this is like an arms race between the US and Russia. Like, I get it that we're forced into this, but why are we going to get nuked? You would undoubtedly think that if you lived in that country. You would be really pissed off about that. I love that. And, my dad always said growing up, he always said to me growing up that, especially my grandma lived through Nagasaki. She lived in Sasebo. Wow. She was 5 when the bomb was dropped. And luckily Sasebo is like Beaverton to Portland, so it's over mountain ranges. So not very many of them died. She had a big family. A bunch of them died from cancer after that. But just growing up with someone who had gone through that, and then growing up in the 80s, my dad always says that it wasn't a matter, like, thinking that it wasn't a matter of like, if this is going to happen, it was when. Like, you grew up just knowing that this is going to happen someday. Someday we're going to get nuked. Someday, everyone needs a bomb shelter. My grandpa had built them a bomb shelter and bought like a rifle and everything, and the consensus was, one day we may have to like shoot our neighbors who are trying to take our bomb shelter. And it was like just something you lived with. And it's terrifying that then they would make these movies and play it for kids on TV. That's absolutely horrifying. And this movie is so dark. My favorite storyline, my favorite thread is the council that's trapped in the basement of that building, and there's like suffocating and starving to death, but they're still like trying to run society from this bunker,
these crappy radio transmissions, barely able to get a word out, get a word in. They're down to eating like little crisps out of the tin. Like, that's all they have. They can have like 1 or 2 of those a day until they.
And they're smoking.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh man, that's my favorite storyline. I love watching. There's like a sick pleasure I get in these apocalyptic films, and watching like the government heads completely just, let's just try this. They just are trying their damnedest, but everything's falling apart. I get kind of a sick pleasure in watching that aspect. The family aspects are the ones that make me go, oh, it's kind of icky, and I feel bad for them because that would be me. I live in a house, but watching all these government officials try to figure it out and fail.
Right.
Yeah. Nice.
It's the Shin Godzilla effect that it allows you to have that little bit of distance between the monster and, you're the person like completely watching on the sidelines, watching the monster and the government fight.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, those sequences hit really hard, and I love how it. It's like I almost don't want to say how it ends, but this is also something that should incentivize people to go see it. Is I love where it ends. That final scene where you've watched. It begins with this couple, essentially accidentally, or inadvertently conceiving their child, on a hilltop while the world is slowly moving towards war, and it concludes with that child giving birth to a stillborn baby that is just rotted inside of her. What is it, like 15 or so years later? Or about let's see, trying to figure out the math. About 20 years later, or 15 years later, the long amount of time. But they did a kind of bookending in that family aspect and concluding with just her putting the baby aside and like kind of breaking, and then that's freeze frame and cut. And like, it's because that's, I think its strength is just how it forces you to look, you know, and that's the you know, that's why those scenes are really effective. Even just like the fact that I loved how useless it felt when they would shoot looters, and it's like, you understand they're trying to maintain order, but at the same time it's like, in shooting the looters, you're making them waste the food falls down and gets, you know, trashed. So it's like, now no one's gonna eat, because that person may loot the food, eat, and then come go work, you know. So it's like this amazing chaotic nonsensical logic to it.
I definitely, one of my other favorite scenes is where that the pregnant lady, she just ends up losing it, and she runs out of the basement and she's walking around the street. And there's like the little kid who's like looking for his mom, and like the soldier with the bandaged up face. And when you first get the look of like the scope of destruction that it caused, is pretty haunting. That's a great scene with the fog. It's a very visually pleasing film, and like I said, I'm super high on it because I wasn't expecting anything from it.
Certainly
it blew me away.
And it's I love that the British have this tendency to create these really effective apocalyptic visions, in my opinion. Because, you know, like Threads, you know, for me now, coming off of the last like few months of like in January, the Criterion had their bunch of 70s sci-fi, and so my dad watched 2 films out of that: No Blade of Grass and Zero Population Growth. And No Blade of Grass is really bleak. That is a brother against brother conclusion for the ages, and it's like, it's all swelling music and hey, we saved the day, and it's like, he just massacred his brother and his family so he could steal their safe haven. That's how it ends. It's so fucking brutal. And other films like, you know, like The Final Program, and even the almost apocalyptic nature of Britannia Hospital by Lindsay Anderson. You know, those are all like films that they have this way of cynicism with that little bit of artistry. As you're saying, it's pretty to look at. It's amazingly, like, Threads is gorgeously shot. I love how naturalistic it looks, and I figure most of it was shot in 16, is what it seems like, to match a lot of the newsreel footage, and it just really it's one of the most effectively produced, you know, docudrama style films. And like, if for those listening who haven't seen this or are interested in it now, if you're into like Paul Greengrass's work, you really owe it to yourself to try this, because this is where a lot of Greengrass's docudrama style comes from.
It's a scary movie. It's fun to think that the director went on to make LA Story.
Yes, and
Bodyguard.
Yeah, he made my preferred of the two 96, 97 Volcano movies. I prefer Volcano to Dante's Peak.
Oh. Hot take.
Yeah, that is a hot take.
It's more fun. Dante's Peak is bummer. It's a type of bummer that makes you feel bad.
Yeah. I've got a soft spot for Dante's Peak, though. I saw that at a young age, really young age.
Yeah.
I did not see Volcano at a young age.
Oh,
Volcano
okay.
is good too, though.
Yeah, it is good.
They're both pretty fun Volcano movies.
Yeah. Threads. I can't recommend that one enough to anybody out there who likes apocalyptic horror films. Definitely check this one out. It breeds anxiety. It's got a lot of like really good quotable lines and scenes. I mean, I love when the bombs first go off, and like the guy, he gets up and he looks at the mushroom cloud, and all he says is, "Oh my God, they've done it." You know, because I don't think anyone no one really thought that it was going to happen, and boom, here it is. You know,
if you look into it, and this is only just me regurgitating things that Stephen Thrower said in his interview on the disc. But in a year, basically a year before Threads aired, there was we were a hair from nuclear apocalypse.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, there was a Soviet satellites or whatever picked up a false strike of 5 missiles that they thought were coming from the U.S. And the only reason they didn't strike is because the guy who was looking at it said, no, if he held everyone back from retaliation because he thought that if the U.S. did strike, it would be a lot more than 5 missiles.
You'd like to think that this would never happen because we've lived so long with the concept of mutually assured destruction that nobody, and just knock on wood, that nobody would ever have the balls to really do that. And you kind of hope that maybe in a certain way, and this is me just being optimistic about things, that maybe all these countries having nuclear arms is maybe a good thing. Like, war can only get to a certain point to where everyone kind of does what like the Soviets did in Afghanistan or we did in Vietnam and just go, all right, fuck it, just leave. Just leave. It's over. We're done. Because at a certain, like, we're not gonna nuke people. So
one would hope.
It up.
But I mean, but we also didn't believe that global pandemics that were going to have people locked down. And I mean, what's our death total up to in the U.S.? I've been meaning to look that up all day. I'm gonna look.
Well, the thing about that is, I remember I always watched the Learning Channel and Discovery Channel and stuff as a kid, and I remember.
I thought you were gonna say now, and I was like, yeah, I love like midget reality shows, whatever's on the Learning Channel now.
There was this great little 45-minute kind of show that they had, and Bill Gates was on it, and Stephen Hawking was on it. I think Stephen Hawking may have even been kind of the host of it. He spoke about every single thing, and it was what would actually destroy humanity. And AI was on the list, and an asteroid was on the list, but number one was a pandemic. So I've always grown up knowing it's no, this shit will kill us, because I had Stephen Hawking and Bill Gates sitting there saying nobody's ready for something like this. It always happens throughout history. Something comes up and kills people, and they don't think it's going to be very bad. Mm-hmm. And it's funny, as a kid, I wanted some sci-fi thing, right? I wanted Asteroid to be number one, and I remember being disappointed. It's oh man, pandemic is too real.
Yeah, well, it's not a bang, it's a whimper.
Yeah,
right. What is that? That's a phrase, right?
Glorious. It's not glorious, that's for sure.
Yeah, but it's wild. Yeah, okay, I looked up the numbers. So as of this recording, it is 5:11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on May 9th, 2020. Confirmed 4.02 million, recovered 1.36, 279,000 dead. And
I mean,
and
that's global conflict levels. That's
it's a sobering number for sure.
Yep. That's Korean War numbers right there.
Oh yeah,
of Americans killed. I mean, it's pretty awful, and so many people, I have people in my family who, have felt sick and they've been quarantining themselves, but the lack of tests and everything, it's scary to not know if people that you love and care about are sick,
Yeah,
really,
that's rough.
Pretty tough.
And I don't know if you guys saw, one of our small bit actors from Spunk's Not Dead, Tip. He it looks like he caught it. He's doing better now. Yeah, he's fine. He's out of the woods at the very least. But I mean, it's going to take probably months, if not years, for his lungs to fully recover. And so he's able to go out and around. He's been okay for about 2 weeks, but it's a case of the story of what happened to him the night he began to realize he had to go in and get tested for it. I mean, God, that was a rough night. So yeah, well, I mean, that's just to finish the point is that we have this, as we're saying, we keep thinking it's never going to happen to us, but it's we always have to keep these precautions, and Threads is a wonderful reminder of that.
Mm-hmm. The one thing I will say about, just to piggyback on you talking about one of our, I don't know if I know him, but one of our bit actors getting sick. it kind of makes me sad how everybody's like threshold for this is, well, you know, you're probably not gonna die. It's like, what? Getting horribly sick sucks.
Yeah,
that's like not a good thing. It's like that's not a good bar to have. That
well, and
you're not gonna die.
Right. And it's also, I mean, what they're saying is like, you know, more reports are coming out about how it's going to affect your lungs. I mean, people may, like, especially for kids that catch it to a severe degree but don't die from it, like they will have scarring, developmental issues. If it's like pneumonia and therefore it takes out your oxygen, it means you're not going to get oxygen for, like, you know, little infants or toddlers, which means that they're going to, again, their brains are going to have problems. And yeah, and those of us that are adults, I mean, those of us with other health problems, I mean, you know, because my asthma has gotten a lot worse, or at the very least is more active in the last like 5 or 6 years. You know, this may, like, you know, practically have me on like oxygen tanks if it hits me, you know, if it doesn't kill me outright. So it's and, you know, as much as that seems like hyperbole, I mean, the stories we're all hearing and reading in the news, I mean, this is scary shit. It's real. Which, you know, again, that's trying to bring it back to the movies, you know, is like, that's the thing about Threads, and it's the amount of research they seem to put into it is it's about really making something, you know, making it tangible in front of your eyes. So you can't look away. You can't say, oh, that's fake. That it's like, no, this is real. This is what's going to happen. And I think, you know, it's a bummer that, you know, what people have said is Contagion, you know, the Soderbergh film, which we mercifully didn't cover as everyone else has been covering.
Right.
But I guess, yeah, it's supposed to cover. I haven't seen it in the film. I mean, even at the time it came out, I knew, okay, this is a bit much for me. But that's that's kind of like the example of, like, you know, we have to take this seriously. We were sort of like, we were warned, you know, for a long time about these possibilities. And yeah, so fingers crossed that some tide can change, but at the very least, we just got to hunker down and do our best to keep the species alive so we can keep making movies.
Yes. So, out of 5, Chris, what do you think, since you're the newbie here on this one?
Oh, great. I'll just keep it quick and sweet. I'm going to give this, I honestly am going to give it 5 out of 5, just because, you know, even with every problem that's there, I can totally look beyond it, just because the tone and directing of the content is masterful. And it's an incredible piece of work. I'm shocked that this guy went on to make Volcano.
What about you, Zach?
Yeah, I'll give it a 4. I think it accomplishes exactly what it set out to do, which is to tell people that if something like that happened, leaning some doors against the wall with a pillow and hunkering down is not going to save you.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd also give it a 4. It's like, it's a perfect nuclear apocalyptic film. You know, it's probably my favorite nuclear apocalyptic film. Catastrophe 1999 is, it definitely ends, spoiler alert, with it progressing to that point. But I mean, that movie's, I mean, it's basically, it's like global warming. It's everything. It's really just like the downfall of humanity. So it's not necessarily the same type of movie. So yeah, it's like Threads is nearly perfect in my mind as far as that subcategory goes. It's got everything.
Cool. So I guess does that move us on to our final, more intimate and much more out there choice for today?
Yeah, I've just any excuse to talk about this movie, man.
Yeah, I was glad there was at least one that you could. It's not a light movie by any means, but at least it's outside of the realm of the reality we're living in, where you're like, oh, thank God, at least this isn't going to happen.
Well, I liked that we picked 3 different types of apocalyptic films. You know, I mean, like you were saying, we could have done Contagion. We could, you know, we could have done Outbreak, and you know, we could have just picked like basically the same fucking movie. You know, I'm glad that we did different films, and this one's really different.
I also like, as I was commenting in our group chat before we got started, is how like there's also the different sort of sense of scope where the Crazies is the community effect, the Threads is the national or world, like that way the country is destroyed, and then this one brings it back to just the family, and like just watching this family be completely obliterated by this thing.
Right, this force from outer space. And I mean, do you guys read much Lovecraft? I'm not the biggest Lovecraft fanatic.
I've never read Color Out of Space, but I've read Mountains of Madness and a few other shorts, but I've actually never read Color Out of Space.
I've read the story. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, same. Same. One of the few I've read.
Yeah, it's a case of I've read quite a few. I've read a lot of the short stories, and of the bigger ones, I mean, I've read Call Out of Space, Call of Cthulhu, Shadow over Innsmouth, which I think is my favorite of his. I read most of Dunwich Horror, but I actually listened to a radio play of that, actually, which, if given it's supposed to be pretty accurate to the novel, I'm really curious to see where Richard Stanley's going to go with that, if he's able to get that off the ground after this. And yeah, that was one of the things I loved about this adaptation, is that it's very... in some respects, it's very different, but spiritually, it's very much the same, because it's still the concept of thing lands and corrodes this family from the inside. That's basically the poison from beyond the stars.
Well, I'm sure you guys have both seen The Curse with Will Wheaton, which is sort of an adaptation of Color Out of Space.
I actually haven't.
I haven't either. I thought you were going to bring up Die Monster Die.
And Die Monster Die, which is fantastic. It's got Nick Adams and
I was
Boris
about to say, shout out to Nick Adams. Yes.
I love Die Monster Die. But yeah, you guys haven't seen The Curse. You guys ought to check that out with Will Wheaton. It's a good one. It's produced by Fulci too, which is
I remember the cover of the tape, but I've never actually seen it.
Oh, this one. Okay, so that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, it's
Ice Blue Meteor.
It's sort of the same thing.
Okay. Yeah.
And then while you're at it, check out the sequel, The Curse to the Bite, which is just ridiculous. It's about a guy who gets bit by a snake and then his hand turns into a monster snake puppet.
Well, that sounds like a good time on a Friday night.
It's really good. It's really funny. It's a reference this film and a half, dude. It's
oh, nice.
It needs to be an episode. It's so funny. It's like one of the effects artist Screaming Mad George. It's it's like one of his first movies.
Right.
Just slimy sock puppet.
Bringing a Romero connection. Didn't Screaming Mad George do the zombies for Romero's Resident Evil 2 commercial?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he did.
Any excuse to bring that up, I will. I will take that.
So yeah, Color Out of Space. IMDb page says a secluded farm is struck by a strange meteorite, which has an apocalyptic consequence for the family living there and possibly the world. Yeah, that sounds about right. That's more or less.
That checks out. Just checking my paper. Yep. Now that checks out. We're good.
It leaves out the alpacas and things like that. But.
Yeah. Or in the fact that I didn't even catch this is how the character of the hydrologist is named Ward Phillips, because often Lovecraft told his stories in a very secondhand sort of fashion, as if he was telling you the story. So I love that they named the black character after Howard Phillips Lovecraft. So.
Oh, I didn't even catch that.
It's on the trivia for the film on IMDb. That's a really cool test. Apparently, also Richard Stanley and Swedish filmmaker Henrik Møller apparently performed a ritual to Lovecraftian god Yog Sothoth while in the Pyrenees to get the film made. Well, apparently that was successful. So.
He's a character, dude. I met him randomly. There's a picture out there that I never ended up getting, but I was shooting a little short film for YouTube down in the Hollywood district, and it was the first time that Color Out of Space was playing at the Hollywood Theater for the Lovecraft Festival that happens every year. And we were just kind of hanging out outside Billiards. I think we're just meeting up around there. And see this dude smoking a cigarette, and he's got a cowboy hat and a black trench coat on, and it's nice and sunny, actually, here in Portland. And I didn't even notice that they were playing this at the Hollywood Theater until later, and I'm sitting there staring at this guy going, is that fucking Richard Stanley? Just in the middle of weirdo Portland area? Like, what's going on? So I went over to him, and I was like, this is going to be a really weird question, but are you Richard Stanley? He was like, oh, yeah. So I was like, ended up bumming a cigarette from one of the other people just so I could go smoke a cigarette with Richard Stanley.
Oh my gosh, that's
Pick
so
his
cool.
brain and be like, we're actually shooting a short film, and he said, oh, Color Out of Space is playing, and then I ended up going and seeing it on its second run at the Hollywood Theater. But yeah, it was incredible. He's a character.
Oh man, is he?
Yeah,
Richard's
he's a nice dude.
Yeah, oh, that's right, Zach. I've been meaning to ask, were you present during the shooting of his Severance Cellar video?
Yeah.
Nice. Were you really? God, he's like, I love the documentary, Lost Souls.
It's so good. It's amazing.
Oh God, and you feel so bad for him. You know, he kind of like embodies the anxious side of all artists, like that little anxiety that like gnaws at the back of your brain when you're working on your own project. Like that is Richard Stanley. Especially in that documentary. He's so concerned and like going to the witch, the warlock guy to help him out. Like that's all of us, man.
I love the about the documentary. We'll get to Color Out of Space probably in just a sec, but I was mentioning this to my dad last night about how even it felt weird coming to watch Color Out of Space because it's like, yes, he's back. You know, it's because I haven't seen Dust Devil, but I'm a huge fan of Hardware, and obviously, you know, Dr. Moreau isn't really his film anymore, but it felt like this was, you know, he also didn't feel like he'd ever been gone. And I said, like, well, he's such a character of the Lost Souls documentary. And my dad says, yeah, he didn't direct it, but it's still a Richard Stanley story, you know, because it's so intrinsically linked to him that it feels like one of his movies. And his voice is so prevalent, but yeah, it was getting back on track though with Color Out of Space. It's like, this is the guy for this kind of movie, Lovecraft story. It's especially this one. Like he found the right pieces and made the right changes, and still made something very much his own. So it's not like beat for beat hitting everything. And it's just this is a trip. You know, like of the three films we've all talked about, this is easily the most fun you can have out of these three films.
Totally. It's one of the most fun movies, one of the most fun theater experiences I've had in a while. And I was seeing quite a few, like right in that month that this came out. I saw a couple of movies at the Hollywood Theater. I think you actually went with one of the times, Chris, and we saw Uncut Gems.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
That was for Michael's birthday. Yeah,
Michael's birthday. Yeah, and I had been seeing a lot of movies, especially movies that I felt like I'm supposed to see as a filmmaker. And Color Out of Space was the one that was just kind of like the guilty pleasure, like let's just go see something fun and goofy, and it's been my favorite of all of them. I had so much fun with this movie. There are some moments in this that are genuinely disturbing too. You know, a lot of people say that it's a good movie, but it's a victim of bad visual effects. And I mean, other than a couple of moments, I don't think it's bad at all. I love the lighting. I love the the digital work that they did with like the plants and everything. I think everything looks nearly perfect for, certainly like the budget.
On that topic, the one that I've seen people point out is like the bug that comes up out of the well. They point that out as but I mean that it's otherworldly.
Right.
I feel like it's
absolutely.
I feel like that was the intention of it, or maybe
honestly,
they made it work within the limitations of the visual effects they could pull off by making it this otherworldly thing.
Right.
It doesn't look any worse than the mantis in Pan's Labyrinth, which I mean I know admittedly that came out a long time ago, but I mean that's fine. Has almost a Harryhausen kind of feel to it.
Yeah, the effect I think that is maybe the one that kind of makes you go, is the tree that attacks the officer at the end.
Yeah, the tree was the one for me. Yeah, and the vision of the other side was a little, that's where you could feel they were pushing it a bit. But no, there's really subtle effects too. There's a great bit. I think it's when, it's at one of the points they're going to the barn when the alpacas have had the thing happen, and you can see these subtle distortions around the sides of the frame. It's really soft. You can barely on a TV. You're not going to notice it. If you watch this on either a big screen television or at the theater, that's when you see like, whoa, like the world's starting to warp around them a little bit. And it's they do some really subtle, amazing stuff with like proximity, and visually it's a delight. Also, I'm looking up the trivia again, being the hack researcher doing the IMDb thing rather than watching special features, but they mentioned that the film uses magenta to represent the alien color, which has always been people's question: how do you represent the color out of space?
Right.
And apparently it's a color that does not exist on a single wavelength of light as part of the color spectrum of visible light. It is an extra spectral color that is only perceived by humans in a specific interaction of the optical rods in their eyes that detect red and blue colors in specific circumstances to then create the color magenta in their minds.
Strange. All right. Yeah.
And that's super nerdy, super geeky, and I kind of want to know how like accurate that is, because it's an IMDb trivia thing, but like that is but I mean, like, because like the only other major adaptation that was able to confront this was a film I think made in Germany or Belgium, and I think the gag was that they did it in black and white, and that was their way to get around it.
Okay. Yeah, I love the color in this movie. I love the visual style of this film. I mean, the movie that I just made, there are a couple of scenes, actually the one that you've seen, Chris.
I was thinking about that.
I was like, I'm gonna light this magenta, which I had no intention of doing that. But I was thinking like I originally kind of wanted to do the scene in black lights because it's supposed to be at 420. It's like these stoners smoking. And then instead of doing it with black lights, I was like, well, black lights are kind of pink, magenta, purple color. Why don't I just do that? It's a little bit of, like a callback to this movie, because it was just so fresh in my mind. There's something so exciting about this movie. It makes you want to be a little bit more adventurous, I think, as a filmmaker, and kind of go for that just bizarre look, right? I mean, he just throws the kitchen sink at it. Oh yeah. Doesn't really care, It's like, here, let's go as far as I want to go. I'm not gonna, ponder it, too much. This is too much, or
Right. And and also I thought was a great way of using the idea that color is what you're supposed to be afraid of. In the book, what I remember is that it's about decay. It's about essentially ash and things rotting and falling apart, but that everything turns very gray. And that was what Die Monster Die sort of used visually, if I recall, as well. And I love that this film does the opposite, showing the more richer colors showing up, and that they're beautiful, but they're unnatural, because they shot in a location where it's really green. It's beautifully green. And then when the harvests and stuff start to come in, or I should say when the color takes over the farm, seeing these bright, vibrant, it's beautiful, but it's also haunting because it is unnatural. It's something that our brain tells us grass isn't supposed to look like that. Plants aren't supposed to look like that. And that was a great way I felt to build up the tension in those moments. And as well, I also appreciate that. I love that this was a monster movie at times. I miss that so much in these kind of pictures, is having critters. Like I appreciate that, you want to have a certain amount of show don't tell, but I love seeing stuff. Like, I mean, that's why that's why, you know, when it comes to Stuart Gordon's Lovecraft, or the Gordon using a Lovecraft inspired movies, my favorite really is Dagon, because it's got critters in it. You know, it's got the fish people, it's got Dagon himself at the end and all that. And that's what I loved here. The mutations, the very Thing style mutations are great. The mom son thing is one of the most horrifying things. Like, in the theater, I really
the reveal. The reveal was like it actually made me gasp when I saw it.
Yeah, because I mean, I saw it coming a mile away, and I think it was just kind of over prepared and too much time had passed, you know, because like I think if I'd seen this in the theater in October, because I only just watched it just last night, that would have just blown my mind, you know.
It very much. And I was like slightly stoned for this movie too.
Oh,
so
no.
it was like it was perfect. And as soon as that happened, you know, I guess I just didn't. I should have known what I was getting myself into with a Richard Stanley movie. Richard Stanley version of Color Out of Space. But God, what a disturbing image of, you know, of course they get the cutest little boy in the world who's in that Haunting of Hill House show on Netflix. And he's really good in that. And you're watching this and he's so goddamn cute. He has all these cute lines. And then like the last thing you actually see of him really is he's being absorbed by his mom and he's crying. It's like, oh, buddy. You feel so bad for him.
That whole section of the movie was amazing, and it was great to see that goopy body horror that does call back to like Reanimator and From Beyond, and the idea that people have of what a Lovecraft movie is. Sort of.
Yep.
And,
please go ahead.
I was just going to say, I also really like Nick Cage unironically. I really do.
Same.
Really enjoy his work. And I thought he did a really good job in this movie, and I sort of covered this on my initial review for this film. The thing that irks me the most about seeing Nick Cage movies in theaters is it seems like half the crowd goes there just to see Nick Cage be crazy, and no matter what he did, half the people in the theater would laugh, and it would start getting on my nerves.
Someone else actually told me that too.
Yeah.
Well, I've heard that as well. I didn't see it in the theater. I watched it at home.
It was really it really started getting on my nerves. It's like every line he said, people would laugh.
Oh man. And I mean,
it's unfortunate because the moments where it's intentionally funny, it's so good. Like he does it so well. Like the scene where he's watching himself on the news show on the TV was so fucking funny.
I didn't say UFO.
Yeah,
they said UFO.
Like the moments of intentional humor are really good. So I feel like it would be annoying to watch with a crowd who is watching it as a sort of joke.
Right.
Or watching Nick Cage freak out,
Yeah.
Right.
It was like a circus at that point. People were kind of coming to see the freak show is what it felt like, which is really sad because Nick Cage is a damn good actor. And I think at this point, yes, he's playing into his persona now.
Yeah.
Because it's getting him work and why not? I bet that's fun. Like just speaking as an actor, like there would be nothing better than having like this little cult of people who just want to see you be kind of stupid and goofy and you have your own shtick. And, he definitely does that in points, but with this film, he's I feel like he's not doing what he did in the movie Mom and Dad. He's earnestly turning out a performance here, and he's good.
Yep. And that's, I mean, what I loved in the work he does and that the characters do through the film, and Stanley's direction of this, where the insanity turns on and off and they can't control it, and you never know when the influence of the color is going to latch onto them or go away. Like when Cage is ready to kill he's initially ready to kill the thing that once was his wife and youngest son, and he's ready to do it, and then the color takes over and then it turns around. But like even where he gets mad and yells at the daughter, and then like it shuts off, and he's like, and he almost like has no recollection even practically of what he did, and those moments are just so and they're so real too. It creates this wonderfully dysfunctional deconstruction of the family unit, and the fact that he even during his crazy points, I mean, I thought this was humorous, but also it's haunting because because we're living through this, is how he's mimicking Donald Trump's kind of diction, and there's points where you could hear it in his voice where he's like, it's like, right. Yeah, it's this and it's like that and realizing like, oh god, that's right, if I turn on the news, that guy's the fucking president,
right? Yeah. Dad, who's supposed to, in a sense be like the head of the household, he's supposed to take care of all of this, and he kind of ends up being like the weakest amongst them. I think if there's anything that I would complain about the movie is the stoner brother gets really lost in the shuffle and almost feels at times like he doesn't need to be there. And then he has this, because all of them obviously have their own quirk, right? Like Nick Cage, he has like the smell that's bothering him. They all have these different things. And the stoner brother has this whole thing with like loss of time. Which I think would have been interesting, but we never see it. He's just like, oh, I was walking around in the field and now it's 12 hours later and, I lost all this time. And that was something I really wanted to see. He was just not a very developed character, and kind of felt like if I had one grievance, like maybe I could have lost him. He didn't do anything. Yeah, except for he introduces Chong.
Right. Which could have happened on its own anyway, because right. I mean, because I do love that buildup that they're not sure if Ezra, I think is the character's name, if they're like, we don't know if he'll talk to you, and then as soon as he, Ward shows up on the property, he's like, hey man, come on in, it's good to see you.
He's a fairly chatty guy.
Yeah. And what it is he already knows, he's already looked him up and it's like, oh yeah, this kid's fine, don't worry about it. Right. Come on in. You want a spliff? All right, cool.
And he's good in this too.
Oh, he is. I mean,
he's doing his shtick, but his whole little monologue about it, like it's in the water, it's in here, it's out there. He has a really good moment in this.
Yep. But I mean, that's the coolest thing. I mean, when we heard, it's so wild to think, because now it's like we sort of take this for granted, but we have Richard Stanley, who was like the director that had been outcasted for Dr. Moreau, who had gone off to practice black magic in Europe, and he's able to adapt an H.P. Lovecraft story starring Nicolas Cage and featuring Tommy Chong and tons of body horror and special effects. And I mean, I'm curious what this budget was for this. I mean, I figured this is probably close to like the 7 to 13 range, just based on the amount of stuff they had to build and to do, right. And all and the effect shots. And he's trusted with that. And it's just like, this really happened. This is a real thing. And, and I love how he even like makes the daughter character this like complete, like he makes the self-insert character, not the dad, but the daughter, because she's in the black magic, she's reading the Necronomicon and, and she does her spells. And God, I love that they don't make as big of a deal about her carving the symbols into herself. Like it happens and it's horrifying, but it's like, as the situation worsens, that's kind of the least of her problems kind of thing.
Right.
That was great. And also reminds, I just also was looking at the trivia here, but it just reminds me of I got a big laugh out of what's written on Benny, the older son's wall, no flesh will be spared, or shall be spared, from Hardware. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm a little bit disappointed that this movie didn't make a bigger splash in the cult horror community. I really thought that it would. Sadly, I wonder if it's just been a little long for Richard Stanley. You know what I mean? Like too long of a hiatus. I was really expecting this
for too long.
No, I know. I love Richard Stanley, and I really thought that this was gonna like kind of bring him back into that fold of genre directors, like newer genre directors. And I don't know if it has. I mean, I hope he has like some producers blowing up his phone.
Well, it sounds like Chris mentioned earlier he's doing Dunwich Horror,
Right.
next, is what he's said. So
Yeah. Yeah, as far as I know, it'll be the same producing team behind this because they really were gunning for this project to happen. About like what's it they say about to the 2015. That was when Spectrovision had come on board to produce it, and so and then later when they were promoting Mandy, that's when they said, okay, yeah, our next big project is Color Out of Space.
And I hope they continue doing Nick Cage movies. Because I liked Mandy, but I mean, I think Color Out of Space is a better film than Mandy.
Agreed. Yeah, I liked this a lot more than Mandy.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a case of Mandy has some incredibly creative ideas, but its narrative is a little too threadbare to kind of hinge itself on. Whereas Color Out of Space is really, for the most part, well developed.
Yeah. Yeah. Good old Nick Cage.
Yeah.
You're gonna love Nick
Yeah,
Cage.
I do. I mean, he is an interest. He's always fun to watch, whether you think he's good or whether you think he's a ham. He's entertaining,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't mind. I hope that John Travolta leans into the Fanatic.
I do too. Yeah,
real fucking hard.
That's another good example of an actor now who's got a little bit of a shtick, and people are looking for that, and they're kind of leaning into it. Yeah, I mean, I know getting off topic, but as far as the Fanatic goes, that's another one where you see all these people, they've got all these reviews talking about how bad it is or how goofy he is, and kind of go, I think you guys are missing the point. I think that's kind of the point is, you give John Travolta this bizarre character and just tell him to go. Like, no, don't reel him in. You don't reel Nick Cage in. You let him go.
Yeah, you use him appropriately, and
there was it reminds me actually, because that was one thing I saw Guillermo del Toro saying about Mandy, and I think I read this before I had seen this, but he was commenting that what he loved in Cage's performances, this is classic Conrad Veidt silent actor like character building. That there is and it's sort of that there's a tradition of acting that is more big, broad, theatrical, and that we've sort of lost in the shuffle and lost in these years of evolving the method and subtle performances and so on and so forth. Acting is a really strange thing to me that people can get really hung up on. Actors themselves are like some of the, in my opinion, I mean, no offense, Calvin, but it's a very difficult to agree with their perspectives on acting because it becomes very individual even with actors. And it's because I mean, there's people that will tell me that, oh, this TV show, has this really amazing performance. And I'm like, which one is it? Stargate Universe. And it's like, there are parts of Stargate Universe that I like. Carlisle was really good in it, but there's some performances in that are not strong. They're good for what they are, or what it is. But that's even the thing is, it comes back to, like, when we're talking about the Color Out of Space, we're talking about all three of these films really, is that the performances have to match the material with which they're working with, which is like the case of like where like the Crazies, it's working with a lot of community actors, and Romero's directing isn't quite as refined to develop those characterizations. But then you have like some like Threads where like it has to be heavier, it has to be kind of annoying, it has to be very shouty, it's because it's all the chaos and the horror of it. And then something like Color Out of Space, which has to have those kind of theatrical, very pulpy aspects. And that's what all of the performers in the movie for me really give. The only person who I feel is the weak link is the guy who has a small part as the sheriff who gets eaten by the tree. And he's the only person that kind of feels a little out of place. But even then, I guess that makes sense because that's why he's a bit player that gets eaten.
Right.
But it's like even the hydrologist, like his delivery of that line, it's like they say, hey, would you like a drink of water? And he goes, no, thanks. That's actually what I'm here about. Like that.
Right.
He delivers that like 3 times and it's perfect. And it's a like those traits. That's what I love about, being able, as we're saying about seeing Cage, is like seeing the variety of it. That's why I mean, my one of my personal favorite Cage performances is Face Off, because he gets to have all the fun playing Castor Troy as this, this maniac terrorist for hire, and then gets to play the Sean Archer version, who is just all pure raw John Woo introspective tortured assassin, all in the same movie basically, and getting to have all those little beats, get to have those. I mean, that's why we have the memes of Nicolas Cage from that movie of his big wild smiles.
Right. But that and Vampire's Kiss, which is another one you haven't seen. Yeah.
I still haven't seen that. A lot of early Cage.
I think it's on Prime right now. It's good. I watched it recently, actually.
Yeah, he was also in Moonstruck, right?
I don't know. I've never seen.
I think
that was
that's the one with Cher.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've never seen it.
Okay. I'm bringing this up because I'm reminded. My girlfriend keeps telling me I got to watch that. So.
Yeah,
I've never seen it.
I've never seen it either. His first movie though is my favorite non-genre movie of all time, Rumblefish.
Yes, Rumblefish. Fuck yes, Rumblefish.
He's Smoke in that movie, and he's so good in that too. Just as a small character, he has one of the best lines in that movie. And that movie is just the novel and the movie speak to me on a very, very deep personal level. Any time of my life I'm having like deep issues, I turn to Rumblefish, either watching it or reading it. It's just an amazing story. Deals with like Greek mythology and stuff like this. But
Rumblefish is great. It holds up so well too. Whereas I don't think The Outsiders, the film, has held up very well at all.
Yeah, Rumblefish has definitely withstood time more so than the other S.E. Hinton even novels. I think that Rumblefish is the one that's sort of timeless. But I love Nick Cage's delivery in that movie too, because he's very cocky, but he's the one who sort of clues the audience on. He has like the very memorable line where he says that no one would follow you into battle, Rusty James, because you'd get people killed. No one wants to get killed. He's the one who like finally breaks it to him, like, you're not your brother. You're kind of stupid. I'm like your brother. He said if the gangs were still around, I would be the leader and not you. And he's perfect in that movie too. So yeah, Nick Cage, man. I don't know. Anything else you guys want to say about this film?
There's one last thing I have to mention, which is just, this is such a Richard Stanley thing I noticed in the soundtrack, is that, the girl, Lavinia, the daughter, listens to a bunch of heavy metal and kind of, like thrash and stuff on her headphones. Apparently, according to the credits, one of the tracks is by Mayhem. And that's such a Richard Stanley touch. If you're familiar with the band Mayhem, yeah, Zach's laughing because he knows what I'm talking about. Yeah. When you look up those guys, oh boy.
I didn't notice that in the movie. I'll have to.
Yeah, but it's just So what was the film? They did like a fictional film about that situation, right? Was that
the recent one, Lords of Chaos?
Oh, Lords of Chaos with Rory Culkin, right? It's the Culkin brother. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff about the documentary.
Yes, I've seen
someone
the
did a while back about black metal was really good too.
Yeah,
the name of the band didn't come to mind because I don't listen to a lot of thrash metal. I'm more of a punk rock guy.
Yeah,
but I'm very aware of that story. Yeah, they were like burning down churches and stuff.
Yeah, but it's like that was one of those like, that is such a Richard Stanley thing to do, that even the soundtrack has a Mayhem track on there. Right. Like, fuck yeah. Color Out of Space, go see it. We all love it.
Yeah, I mean, it's really a movie you just got to see for yourself, It kind of I don't know, being critical or anything is like, it's I don't know. It's not one of those movies. It's just a visually pleasing experience. It's like a roller coaster. It's like trying to describe why a roller coaster would be fun for someone to experience. It's like, you just got to go on it,
Yep. And I would also recommend if you want to follow up to like sort of like, okay, where could you take those ideas of things shifting and changing and transforming, is Annihilation would probably be a really good double bill with Color Out of Space.
Yeah. Maybe even The Void. Did you guys see The Void?
I haven't seen that yet, but I need to. Yeah.
That would be a nice little double bill with this. A lot of the same themes. It's funny that you mention like the soundtrack and the score. The three people that I have working on the music for No Sleep, just talking to them, and I haven't been able to obviously sit down with any of them. So one of the first things that I told them to do was watch Color Out of Space, because I really love that industrial sound that it's got to it, especially like the opening of this movie. It has just like this great kind of mechanical droning otherworldly feel to it. And I mean, it's definitely like what I envisioned for the movie that I just shot. It's just different. It's kind of got like a Nine Inch Nails kind of feel to it.
Nice. And we're talking old school Nin, like what was the second album, the one with the fire on the cover, the one that Wish comes off of? I keep forgetting the title of that album, but like that. And or I'm saying, is it like that older school, that and Pretty Hate Machine, or are you going more towards the Trenton Atticus compositions?
You know, I'm not the biggest Nine Inch Nails fan, so I'm not as well versed on the progression of their style, but I don't know. Also bands like Portishead, so I guess kind of that like late 90s.
That's more of that's kind of in the middle. So that'd probably be more
kind
like
of machining, kind of like droning machine noises.
Cool.
There's just something about that is, I think, perfect for a movie. It's not necessarily like, I wouldn't rule it out, but it's not necessarily my cup of tea to like, you know, listen to with my headphones in. Like I said, I'm much more of like a punk rock kind of guy. But I think for like a movie, that is just it's great. It's very cold.
So speaking of punk rock, that just reminded me. Are you familiar with the Abolitionists?
I'm not.
Okay,
no.
So Joe Sherlock got me connected to, or tried to get me connected with them to try to find a track for Spunks Not Dead's trailer or for any sort of stuff for us to complete the movie with, and it never worked out. I reached out and they never got back to me, but they did an awesome punk metal concept album about the apocalypse in Portland. And so there's even like Burnout on Burnside, Dead on Mount Tabor are track titles. And it's rad, and it's pretty good and heavy. I liked it, so you might like it as well.
Yeah, no, I'll check that out for sure. Yeah, I know that during when we did Jesus I Was Evil, I linked up with 3 all-female punk rock bands here in Portland that are really great. Bitch School and the Exorcists, they're great. They do some really good music.
Nice. The Vicious Rumor is the LP I'm talking about. I'm actually going to go ahead and link you to this right now.
Cool. So ratings for Color Out of Space. Someone take it away. Me? All right. Oh boy. I think that over time, my score will maybe come down a little bit. I'm still pretty high on this movie, and I always take that into consideration. I mean, I did that with Shin Godzilla. My rating was higher than how I feel about it now. Like the more time goes on, because I really enjoyed myself at the time, but then the more you revisit films, sometimes more often than not, for me, they grow cold. They don't get warmer. That's why something like the Crazies is so high in my book, because it started low and actually I grew to enjoy the movie more and more. That usually doesn't happen for me. But Color Out of Space, for the time being, I'd give a solid 4 to Color Out of Space. It was so fun to see it in the theater. It's so fun to see Richard Stanley. I love Richard Stanley. He needs to make movies until he dies, and somebody out there needs to give him money. He's a genius.
Yeah,
a genius. Solid 4.
I think I'm gonna go with the solid 4 as well. Yeah, and maybe a 4.5 on a good day. It's just a case of that the Lovecraft movies that I love very deeply, and so those are going to be hard ones to knock out of those positions, like Reanimator and obviously the Gordon films. So Reanimator, From Beyond, Dagon. Actually, I'm a big fan of that silent movie Call of Cthulhu that they did with the stop motion animated Cthulhu in it.
I didn't see that.
Oh my God. Oh man. Zach, have you seen that one either?
No, I haven't.
Oh man. Okay, I'm gonna track this down and get this to you guys. You need to see this. It's not amazing. I mean, this is done like on a shoestring on weekends over the course of like 4 years or something. But it's really cool, and they do everything as much retro style as they can. But yeah, so for me with Color Out of Space, I think 4 to 4.5. There are definitely some weaknesses. I feel that the third act gets a little protracted, which kind of slows
long at times.
Yeah, it's because it sort of like has in many ways almost like 3 or 4 different climaxes. And the problem, to be grody about it, is that cinema is really hard to make a multi-orgasmic. You know what I'm saying? Where you drag it out as long as you can, those conclusions. But yeah, so I think that's where it lands, but it's definitely something I would love to see more of. If this dude is doing Dunwich Horror, I'm super stoked for that, because I love that story, and just thinking of the ideas of what he could play with in that tale, with the monster in the barn and with the brother that's kind of like a satyr, and I mean there are some awesome things that could fucking happen in that story.
Yeah, I've only seen it the once, Color Out of Space, but I was going to give it a 4 as well, because I would watch it again happily, and might do so within a couple weeks. Even.
Hey, I don't go out and buy new movies on Blu-ray very often. Newer releases. I rushed out as soon as this one was released, and I got it. I got the Blu-ray. Yeah. It's got a like a great holographic slip case to it. It's very colorful. I actually have it up on display right now because it pulls attention. It's really pretty. Yeah, love this movie. And I guess just to throw in really quick, we probably should say R.I.P. to Stuart Gordon.
Oh God! Yeah. Oh man, that just hit. Oh God!
Which speaking of, you were listing off some of his films. I'm sure you have. Have you seen the Masters of Horror? His Dreams in a Witch House.
I have.
Right.
I like it. I'm not Masters of Horror. I have a lot of mixed feelings about as a show.
Some of them are fantastic.
Some of them are amazing. Like Dear Woman's amazing. Imprint is like
Jennifer is great.
Jennifer, I was not as warm on actually, but I haven't. But I haven't seen it in a long time, so it's
probably my favorite one. That and Dear Woman are my two favorite masters.
Really? Yeah, my favorites were My favorites were like Cigarette Burns, yeah. Family. I really liked. Yeah, Dear Woman. Okay, here's one thing I would say. If like say you gave me Dreams in the Witch House from Stuart Gordon versus like some of the other ones, I would probably put Dreams in the Witch House over a lot.
Yes.
Because I will say the lighting in that is gorgeous. It's so good. And I think part of what tarnished tainted my perspective going into it was I saw this really cheesy shot on video adaptation of it at the H.P. Lovecraft Film Festival in 2002. And it apparently was like a thing that they played that film. It was like 2002. It was the early 2000s. And it was like a thing that they was kind of like the room for that crowd, that they played this version of Dreams in the Witch House. It's shot on video, horrible acting, no lighting, like it's all, whatever they just had on. Like all the scenes are supposed to kind of be at night. They pretty much all set during the day. So they have the attic room with the window in there. And so that always sort of threw me going from that version to Stewart's, because the memory of that was so strong.
Right.
But that was back when the H.P. Lovecraft Film Festival played a lot of schlock. I'll be nice to call it schlock, but it was the shorts blocks were hard to sit through. Like the last one I went to, or the last few like horror fest shorts blocks I've been to have been amazing. So it's times have changed, but Stewart though. I mean, I love that. I mean, yeah, we almost could do like a whole episode of Stuart Gordon, which I almost don't want to distract us from that, but like we totally could. I mean, covering like Fortress and Robot Jocks and Space Truckers and Stuck. Like I've been trying to get my dad to watch Stuck for like almost 15 years. I fucking loves that movie. It's so good.
Yeah, he's true master of the genre. Definitely will be missed. Yeah. Sad, really sad. Well, guys, I think that about does it for our featured reviews. Do you guys have anything really quickly that you'd like to plug for people to check out? Chris, I know that you're doing your YouTube reviews now, so.
Yeah, I mean, I've got 3 different projects I work on these days, which is the YouTube movie reviews, which are kind of slow going because the podcasts take a lot of work. But yeah, I've the next one I'm doing is Wait Before I Die, which should hopefully which actually might be up by the time this episode's out. I have 2 more films, and I'm gonna kind of call it quits on that for now. But I might do like a shorts block, either episode or series of episodes where like I do like mini reviews about shorts. Part of that was inspired because Stephen Jackley sent me the link to Fanatico, which is a Giallo inspired short that was made here locally recently. But yeah, there's that project. There's for other kind of horror related stuff. I also do a Let's Play channel with some of my friends that are gamers. We call it Mystery Death Theater 5000 because it's very much in that Rift Tracks kind of vein. We did a series of Clock Tower, which was really a lot of fun because that's basically a Giallo game in many respects. And then the last thing to plug is I'm now my friend now currently long distance girlfriend got me to do a podcast of Laverne and Shirley with her called Night After Night, which has been fun. But what's great is because we're both horror nerds. We met because of the fact of a shared love of Bubba Hotep and Bruce Campbell movies. It's a podcast about Laverne and Shirley where you come for the sitcom and stay for me to reference Ken Russell's The Devils on it. So so it's one of those types of shows. So, if you're into sitcoms, it's a fun little ride. But anyway, like I said, I've been busy. I'm ranting, but I've been busy. I've been doing a lot of different stuff. So plug away, guys. You guys have probably got a whole bunch that you want to toss in.
That's you, Zach.
Oh, no, Disco Stew doesn't advertise. No, I'm not doing much. I'm just farting around, nothing to say. Honorable mention as far as apocalypse movies go, though. I watched a movie called A Thief in the Night the other day, and if you have a tolerance for religious propaganda, really lovely 70s.
I was raised Catholic, so I got a big tolerance for that.
Good, because it's basically it's the Left Behind story, but it was 1973, really like charming regional kind of shit made in Iowa, pure religious propaganda, but a lot of fun.
Is this the one with Patty Dunning done by Donald Thompson?
Probably. Was it 1973?
It says 72 on IMDb, but wait, no. Released March 22nd, 1973.
Probably
in the US.
Then.
That's
it's
probably
on it's on Prime. There are 4 of them, so I'm probably gonna have to keep watching it. There's a theme song that is amazing called "I Wish We'd All Been Ready." That is like actually a really like catchy song.
I just noticed, words and music by Larry Norman.
Yeah.
Jesus.
But I was surprised. So I enjoy religious propaganda. I find it humorous.
I do too.
And I like regional 70s filmmaking. So there are moments where the filmmaking is fairly impressive.
That's pretty cool.
So, if you want to watch a movie about the rapture and then the ensuing one world government.
Oh no.
And how, I mean, even if you're a Christian, you have to be the right kind of Christian or you're going to get left behind. Well, I recommend it.
There was a very weird blip in time where my mom tried to force Catholicism on my dad and my sister and I, which did not go well for any of us. I mean, especially Dad, who's kind of like the staunchest atheist I know. But we got a fair amount of that kind of shit. And I mean, a lot of priests and nuns telling us that, like, if we didn't convince our father to get baptized, that he was going to hell, which is like not the best way to, at least in my opinion, to indoctrinate people into your religion, But I've got a pretty high tolerance for that kind of junk.
For whatever reason, I've been on a bit of a kick with it. I watched Mesa of Lost Women.
Oh God,
recently.
I love that. I love that movie.
Yeah, and I was looking further into Ron Ormond, one of the directors, and I saw that he went on to make like If Footmen Tire You, What Will Horses Do?
Yep.
And a lot of I think he has one called Burning Hell.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And I know that I'm going to have to watch those.
Burning Hell is actually listed as a documentary on the Internet Movie Database. So
they're
God, with that fucking poster, I'm sending this to you guys. Holy shit.
They're like hybrid documentaries. I've seen both of those, and then Mesa of the Lost Women is a pretty fun little schlocky 50s, early 60s sci-fi film.
Oh yeah, I enjoyed the shit out of Mesa of Lost Women.
It's got like a spider puppet in it too, like a big old spider puppet. Yeah, that's a good one.
But yeah, I mean, as far as apocalypse movies goes, you have a lot to choose from with your religious propaganda.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we could have done Left Behind. We could have done,
Yep.
See, I've never seen the actual Left Behinds. They were too contemporary for me. Where at the time they came out, I didn't. It's easier for me to look back on old religious propaganda.
But it's Kirk Cameron
with a kind eye.
But it's Kirk Cameron. God, he's so smug. He's so smug in those movies because that he's the big star. There's nobody else in those movies. It's just Kirk Cameron. He's just strutting around. Like, come on, dude.
I want to see the one where he saves Christmas.
Oh yeah.
I believe it's called Saving Christmas.
Yeah. Kirk Cameron Saving Christmas.
I mean, hey, at least it's what it says on the tin, right?
Right. God, he is smug.
One last apocalypse, apocalypse honorable mention, which I just noticed I had a list here. I mentioned the other three, but I didn't mention this one. Things to Come, the H.G. Wells film from the 30s, which practically foretells World War II because Hitler was already doing his speeches. They kind of reference him in the first act of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
That's another really good one. And it's cool because there's kind of technically two apocalypses because you see them rebuild and create this almost utopic society that like falls apart in the third act of the movie. So
that movie's got some great miniatures in it.
Oh, it does. It's so
good.
So good. Yeah, I mean, that's on the Criterion Collection. That's that is some good stuff.
I still have a really old, shitty DVD release of that also has the colorized version.
Oh no.
Yeah. No, that's a great movie. That's a really good movie. Yeah, I mean, as far as things to plug, obviously my YouTube channel, please like and subscribe and participate in all of those polls and junk like that. I love interacting with people, and let me know what type of reviews you guys want to see, because as of right now, we kind of have nothing but time.
Don't you also? Yeah, I was about to say, don't you also have a movie on the services?
Yeah, Jesus, I Was Evil was released by Wild Eye. It's out there. You can find it, which is nice. I'm sure it'll be on Prime here soon. Actually, I would like it for it to just be on Prime. I'd like to see it just have the ability to get played. But please, if you're interested in supporting me or just indie filmmakers in general, please check out Jesus, I Was Evil. I mean, speaking of ridiculous religious propaganda, that's sort of what that movie is. It's kind of supposed to be a little bit of a, like, if John Waters decided to make a nunsploitation film, was sort of where my head was at the time.
And I'm kind of disappointed in him for having never done that. Come on, John Waters, get with the program.
I was watching a lot of John Waters when we were making that film. And maybe he's not, I think he's a genius. He's one of my heroes, but maybe he's not the best person to emulate all the time when you're like trying to make a shoestring film. But, he's if I had like a Mount Rushmore of indie artists that I really, really sort of look up to, John Waters is up there. He's just so in your face and just doesn't care. I love his quote about, and it's what I told the cast all the time when we were doing that film, because there are sequences in that movie where I just kind of came up with it the night before and said, hey, we're going to change this. Now we're going to make you, perform fellatio on a gun barrel. That was literally just last second. And people were kind of like, wow, what are we doing? And I kept quoting John Waters and saying that what we're doing is fighting back against the tyranny of good taste.
That's a great quote.
Yes, it's in one of his books, and it was one of those lines that I highlighted because I thought that is brilliant. That is like something that I think we can all benefit from, is that, the idea of what is good taste is pretty it's I was gonna say tyrannical, but he already says tyranny. It's whatever. You know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I quoted John Waters to the cast on the set of The Unquenchable Thirst of Boner Juice 2. I said, now pick up the dog shit and eat it. Went over really well.
I bet.
Did they eat it?
No, there's no poo eating in Boner Juice. That was the one. I don't think. It's been a while since I saw it.
Awesome. Cool. Does that, I guess, wind us all down, though?
I think so.
Cool.
I think so. How long did this one run us?
Oh man, 2.5 almost.
All right, let's get that ad revenue. I'm exploiting both of these guys, by the way. I'm not paying them. So.
Oh, so should I not be holding on to the $2 from the one Spunk's Not Dead sale I made personally in last September? Should I not be holding on to the $2 I owe you? Should I just not?
Yeah, I need my $2. No, yeah, screw that. Well, it's funny with YouTube nowadays is like after you hit 1,000, okay, boom, your partner, you're generating ad revenue, and then you look at it and it's like, oh look, there's like $32 in there. Let me cash out. Well, it turns out you can't start cashing out until you make your first 100. I'm like, you motherfuckers, how long am I gonna have to wait?
Oh man.
To get my first 100. I'm gonna buy movies with it anyway to make more YouTube videos.
Yeah, it's like they should be giving you it's only $20. Like, are you kidding me? I could buy 20 films with that. I can buy 40 films with that.
I could go to the dollar store with that $32 and buy $32 tree DVDs. Which actually I'm going to do a video of those soon. I guess I should plug that. Is I watched 2 of them last night. And my plan is to kind of do like a Dollar Tree quick review of some of these movies, these indie movies. I mean, not to I guess that's kind of like stepping into your territory, what you're doing right now, Chris. But these aren't local artists. These are just little indie artists.
No, I mean, there's
different corners of the world.
Plenty of room, dude. Yeah.
Yeah. C. Thomas Howell movies. I didn't figure you were going to get to The Shadow People, starring for about 10 seconds C. Thomas Howell.
Yeah, probably not. No. I mean, I don't want to spoil what I got left, and part of that's because I don't want to have any expectations. But yeah, I have 2 more. And actually, the one I will say is because I think people will be expecting is I'm going to be doing Escaping Freedom by Ed Blott just to see if it's somehow more depressing than Tale of Delight. So I like to joke that Ed Blott is a guy who watches Bergman movies for fun. So, yeah, but no, that's cool. I'd be happy to see what you do with that, Calvin. It'll be good. Just good times. And it's, I mean, that's the whole thing is I think it's the cool thing we also sort of showed with even the 3 movies that were selected today is that there's all these different ranges within cinema to have our, it's a buffet. My mom likens art to food and how it's like, there's all these different spices, different countries, different chefs. And that's,
different tastes. Yeah. I mean, that's the big one, right? Natalie loves making mushrooms, all types of mushrooms. Not really my cup of tea, but everybody's got a different taste. Everybody's got a different type of movie that they like.
Yeah. So some people like Earl Grey, some people like a twig, some people like a fruit.
Right, exactly. I'm a Bloody Mary kind of guy. Yeah, guys, I guess that's it. Signing off. Until next time.